me like I do, and hold 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 me like I do.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday, you guys. How are you? It's good to see everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping before we get started. I know that Donna Adolescent has a hearing today, a pretrial hearing. She wants Wendy and Dan Markel's divorce filings kept out. She wants it suppressed. But I think she also wants maybe Wendy's book in. It's a little bit confusing. And when I go to the Leon County clerk's cases of interest, anything having to do with Donna Adelson, like you can see the filings, but when you go to click to view them, to read them, you cannot. You can't read anything on Catherine McBanois, or Sigfredo. You get like an internal error message. So I'm not 100% sure exactly what she's trying to accomplish with this pretrial hearing. Nevertheless, she has one today. I have tried to nail down exactly when this trial or this pretrial hearing is supposed to start. I'm guessing it's sometime in the afternoon. So the plan is I'm going to do this morning, and I'm going to cover Donna Adelson tonight, because that will give me an opportunity to view it and be able to speak intelligently on it. I don't want to go into it like I just went into this live, not knowing anything about what's going on. I don't like doing that. So yeah, it's weird, Lil Red. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. There's another filing that happened also where the defense is saying that the prosecution isn't living up to some order that the judge has issued. And because I can't get to those filings, it's really hard for me to go and look and explain, for me to read it, then figure it out, and then be able to explain it. And so I feel like if I do it tonight, that'll be better. Plus, I do miss the viewers that are only able to watch at night when I only do it during the day. Now, moving forward, when the trial starts, I'm just going. Oh, thank you, Lil Red. I appreciate that, babe. Moving forward, when I cover trials, the next one that's coming up is Lori Vallow Daybell's trial. That has to be during the day. There's no way for me to read. There's no way. I don't want to miss any of that. I don't want to miss any of the testimony. So I'm going to do that during the day. And Allie and I will probably do like recaps together at night, because we've already talked about covering the trial together. And when we covered her last trial together, I think it's only fitting. So that's the plan for tonight. I'll go live. I know that Allie and Melissa have a live together on Melissa's channel. I'll go get that link when I start this the testimony. They're going over Casey Anthony, and so I will go live after they're done. I'm thinking if they're going at 7:00 my time, I should be safe to go around 9:30, because I don't expect that the hearing is going to be extremely long. And even if it is a little bit long, we can always, like, speed it up a little bit. And yes, Tosh, absolutely. Tosh says, can you please do more on Maddie Soto? You two are the only ones cursing about Stephen Stearns. Absolutely. That's another thing. After I end this live today, Allie and I are going to work on a schedule so that we can do more Stephen Stearns. So it's going to be busy. I want to get right into it as Anissa Weier's trial, because it's just, I think it's just his. I don't know. Donna Sue Adelson, low red, please. I want to see what time her hearing is scheduled for today. So also, I talked last night a little bit on Allie's panel, which, if you haven't seen that, she went over more of Letitia's filings in her lawsuit against Topeka Women's Prison. And she's still big mad, but nobody cares. Anywho, so I forgot what I was saying. Oh, go check that out. Definitely. If you missed that last night, Allie and I covered that. But anyway, I talked a little bit last night about, like, I was tired and whatnot. Well, I promised my granddaughter, I bought, and if you guys have littles, this is like a good craft project. Over with the Easter stuff, they have like basket fillers for like $3, and they had these little pots that you can paint. And so I got each of, and they're like $3. So I got one for her and one for me. So I promised her we were going to do that. So, and I, when you promise a little, you got to do what you say. And you know how they are with like time. You can't be like, oh, well, just a minute, in a little while. No. Yes, my little chicky nuggy Popeye Esquire. So yeah. So this morning she was so cute. She came in here and she's like, and I was changing out the sheets, and she said, Granny, I'll help you. And she did. God love her. She's such a sweet little thing. And she said, Granny, you're my best friend. I love it when she says stuff like that. So anyway, that's on the agenda. So, but without further ado, let me just check and make sure it's only Michael Caldwell. Oh no. It appears there's testimony from other people. So we'll just, we're going to play it by ear, hear what they got to say, and then discuss. All right, I've put it on the screen. We are ready to go. Closed captions are on. And without further ado, also, good morning, everybody. It's so great to see you. I appreciate you all being here. And if you haven't done so, would you please do your girl a favor? Give your girl a thumbs up, thumbs down, whichever you feel I deserve on the stream. I would appreciate it greatly. Thank you so much. All right, let's go.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. And good morning to the jury. We're prepared to proceed with the State versus Anissa Weier, same appearances as previously noted. Jury's in the jury box. We're prepared to proceed. Then, Attorney McMahon, you have an additional witness to call?
I do, Your Honor. We'll be calling Mr. Taege, formerly known as Mr. Allen.
All right. Good morning. Stay standing, raise your right hand. Clerk will swear you on.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do. All right, be seated. Microphone is the bar with the red light on it. Pull up to that. Then state your full name and spell your last name.
Sure. Jeffrey Taege, Taege.
All right, very good. Thank you.
And were you previously known as Jeffrey Allen?
Yes,
And yet, about 3 years ago, were you a teacher at Horning Middle School?
I was, yes.
And what part of Horning Middle School did you teach?
I worked in the flight academy.
And in Flight Academy, did you have a student by the name of Anissa Weier?
I did.
And do you see Miss Weier sitting over at the table?
I do.
And how was Ani as a student?
She was what I would describe as a typical middle school student. She was very happy, excitable. She loved the program that she was in. She did really well with all of her academics. She knew how to ask for help. She was a great student.
Okay. And when you say she knew how to ask for help, what sort of help would she ask for?
Sure. I was primarily her math and science teacher, and so if she ever had questions about, typically, from what I remember, it was usually math. If she had questions, she wouldn't hesitate to approach me, or she would email me, and we'd have correspondence back and forth and help her work through those.
Okay. And when she would email you, do you remember if it was just during school hours or was it after hours?
A combination of both, I believe.
So if she was, for example, working on schoolwork after hours and she had a question, she would reach out.
Yep.
And she felt comfortable doing that.
Yes.
And again, your recollection was she sought help for math and science.
Yes.
Now, what do you remember her, how do you remember her as in relation to her other classmates?
She was happy, but she was a little quirky. She was always really excited about everything that we were doing and wanted to be involved. I guess I would describe it like that.
Okay. And by really excited, you mean high energy or what?
Yes. Whenever we would introduce something new or we'd talk about a new experience that we were going to have, she would get really excited about it and want to be a part of that.
Okay. And within Flight Academy, there were children of various grades, correct?
Correct.
And at times in the beginning of the school year, with the newer students, assignments would be created where they worked with another student, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember Ani working with a student with the initials of KN?
Yes.
And after they initially worked together, did they continue to work together?
I can't remember exactly, but I would assume so. They were really good friends.
Okay. And were you aware that they talked about Slender Man or creepypasta?
No.
They didn't share that with you?
No.
None of your students did?
No.
And when you thought about Anissa, did you think of her as at the same maturity level as her classmates, or higher or lower?
In terms of maturity level, I think maybe a little bit lower in terms of interacting with her peers, but with interacting with adults, I would maybe describe her as being higher.
Okay. So she related better to adults?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. And with her peers, you thought she seemed a little less mature?
Yes.
And can you tell me why?
Again, 3 years ago, but I just remember vaguely, there would be instances when maybe Anissa would make a joke that she would think was a lot funnier than some of her peers. Her peers might find it funny, but not to the extent that she would. Or I think just the level of excitement that she displayed was more than her peers at that time.
More like a younger child than a middle schooler?
Yeah, I mean, all sixth graders come in at varying levels, but yes.
Okay. Was her appearance ever different than her classmates?
Not that I can remember, no.
Thank you, Little Red. Little Red says, wow. There's no Donna on Pacer. I mean, I know that there is a hearing. Bruh. All right. Thank you, babe. Thanks for looking for me. I appreciate it. All right, let's keep going.
Would anything refresh your recollection? Did you speak to anyone about Anissa 3 years ago?
Detective, yes.
Would looking at his report help you?
Yes, probably.
Chicken Shite says it was probably harder for her to manipulate her peers than it was to manipulate adults. Yeah, and there's something interesting that happens at that
Yes.
sixth grade
And
age,
did that refresh your recollection?
It did.
What did you recall?
particularly with girls. They, I think that Anissa had trouble relating to kids her own age, mainly because I think she wanted to run the show. And when you get in that junior high age range, the dynamics that exist with girls it's it's hard to have. There can only be one queen bee, as it were. Do you know what I mean? And I think if she wanted to be the queen bee, that would be very problematic. I don't think that would be well received. So I think that might have been the issue. All right, let's keep going.
When I talked to Detective Casey, I had mentioned that she wore clothes that were different and more childlike. And again, vaguely remembering from 3 years ago, I feel like I remember that there were times when her clothes didn't necessarily seem to fit. They were maybe a little bit small, or the characters that were on them were more atypical for a middle school student.
Okay, so like something you might see in grade school, but not in middle school.
Yes.
And Anissa had to deal with the rules of your classroom, correct?
Correct.
And was she a rule follower?
Yes.
And did she expect others to do so?
Yes.
What happened when they didn't?
Initially, I remember her calling them out to either myself or Mrs. Crowder. And then she would, for example, if someone was breaking a rule in another area of the program, because we're all spread out in different rooms, she would send an email, for example, that someone was talking in the lounge when they weren't supposed to be.
Okay, so when I was a kid, we would have called that a tattletale.
Someone would use that term, yes.
Okay. And did the other children appreciate that?
I don't know that they ever necessarily knew that it was directly her. There were lots of children who would report when others were not following the rules, and we would never single someone out who had reported to us.
Okay. Did she ever attempt to redirect children by herself?
I can't remember. I can't recall.
Recall her yelling at one child to shut up?
That does sound like something she would have done, yes, initially, early on in the year.
When things like that happen, you had to redirect her, correct?
Correct.
And when you would redirect Anissa, how did she react?
Redirection, I would say, was a little bit more difficult for her than some of her peers. It seemed like it took her a little bit longer to process the redirect.
And how do you mean by process the redirect?
She would kind of go blank just for a second or two, in my opinion, while she was thinking about what she was being asked to redirect. I would interpret it as her wanting to understand the why, and not just the what of the redirect.
Okay. And was that a typical reaction of your students?
Not usually, no.
You have fond memories of Anissa.
Yes.
She was a good student.
Yes.
And you used her as an ambassador for your program, correct?
Yes.
She was excited about it.
Yes.
When she knew things about something, she wanted to tell people.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Sir, you told Detective Casey you believed her to be smart, right?
Yes.
Nothing else.
All right. Any further direct?
No other questions. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. You can step down. Is Mr. Taege under subpoena?
He is, and we will release him.
All right, very good, thank you. Any objections?
No?
All right, thank you. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you.
Then further witnesses?
Interesting, isn't it, chicken
Yes,
shite?
Judge, Dr. Gregory Van Rybroek.
All right.
Next witness.
You could bring him in.
Okay,
If the court's
I'm
okay
gonna,
with this,
I
I'll
need to
give
pause
his,
this right here.
CV and his report.
All right, here's the deal with this. Okay, so remember when Dr. B and I were talking about Grant Amato, and then we got onto the subject of Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser. The doctor that's about to testify is the doctor that she was when Dr. B was in school, that gave the lecture and used this case as an example. And she is going through to find her notes on what all he said. So this is who Dr. B talked to. And also, I want you guys, if you missed Dr. B's live with me about Grant Amato and Aaron Goodwin and his wife and the murder for hire plot, Dr. B shared a video. She used to speak to Grant Amato, and he, this whole situation with him having a contraband cell phone ain't new. And he took video of himself and gave it to Dr. B. And that is, she shared that with us on that live, which was extremely, extremely generous of her. And I appreciate that so much. So if you missed that live, definitely go back and check that out. And I'm really interested in hearing what this doctor has to say because, like I said, he gave a lecture when Dr. B was in school. So here we go.
Or to put it next.
That's fine. All right, good morning.
Morning.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Then
you.
be seated. Pull up to the microphone.
Okay.
That's the bar with the red light.
Sure.
Then state your full name and spell your last name.
Gregory Van Rybroek, capital V-A-N, capital R-Y-B-R-O-E-K.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Van Rybroek, I'm going to give you two exhibits, Exhibit Y and Z. I want you to look at Exhibit Y first.
I also gave Dr. B my theory
recognize
about
that,
Anissa, so we're
Exhibit Y?
definitely going
Yes.
to be talking
And
about
what
that.
is Exhibit Y?
This is my curriculum vitae, sometimes called a resume.
And did you prepare it?
Yes.
Is it an accurate document in terms of up-to-date regarding your training, experience, background, professional information?
Yes.
Let's start by talking about your educational background. Can you describe it?
Sure. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology. I have a master's degree in counseling. I have a doctorate degree, a PhD in psychology, and I have a law degree.
Okay. And I want to talk to you about the law degree. You primarily practice in what area?
Psychology.
But you also have a law degree. What is the significance, or why did you decide to obtain a law degree?
Well, it turns out that along the way, I decided that I didn't want to do strictly private practice, clinical kind of work, and I secretly knew that, but couldn't admit it for a while. And then I was the kind of person who came into a courtroom just like this one, and while it's unpleasant in lots of ways, it also is interesting in other ways. And so I decided I was interested in the field of psychology, psychiatry, and the law, sometimes called forensics. And so I went back to law school with the purpose of understanding better how these issues come together, mental health issues and legal issues.
Okay. And does that training in law school and as a lawyer assist you when you're called in to do forensic evaluations?
Yes.
Okay. And have you had internships that you were involved in the past?
Yes, I have.
And could you describe those?
Well, so graduate school takes a long time, and the expectation when you go to graduate school is that you do many different experiences, internship-wise or practicum-wise. So I've done work inside regular hospitals. I've worked at the university counseling service for college students or graduate students, and I spent many years at Mendota, which we'll get to, Mental Health Institute, as a student working with children, adolescents, adults, geriatric adults, and so forth.
Can you go a little bit further and explain the details of some of the internships you worked in that involved primarily children?
So so I've been at Mendota Mental Health Institute for a long time, and I say that now to tell you that the first 3 years or so are for free because they don't pay students there. And my early years there as a student was working on children's units and adolescent units as part of academic training.
Okay, and let me ask you this. Could you, you said Mendota, and I wanted to see if you could describe what Mendota is?
Sure. So the state of Wisconsin has 2 state psychiatric facilities. These are secure psychiatric hospitals, and one is in Oshkosh, Winnebago Mental Health Institute, and the other one, the oldest one, is in Madison, Mendota Mental Health Institute. It's been around since 1860, and the purpose of the mental health institutes are to be sometimes called the safety net for people who have mental health troubles one way or another. There's lots of legal issues attached to that, but that is the purpose. And Mendota, from 1860 until today, has served in that capacity.
And when you say secure, what you mean is it's locked.
Yes.
And what other training have you received in the past related to your profession?
Oh, my. Do you mean in school training or others?
Any additional type of training that you haven't described already?
So what happens is you go to school for a long time, undergraduate in psychology, and then, of course, in graduate school, which takes another many more years, and then there's ongoing training throughout the rest of one's career. So psychologists, like lawyers, like other doctors, have to get continuing education credits. So I've received those credits and participate in those kinds of trainings, and I've actually done those kind of trainings for other people as well.
And since you work primarily with children, right?
I actually work with children, adolescents, and adults.
Okay. And you work with children, so is it important that you understand adolescent brain development?
Yes.
And did you yourself educate yourself on adolescent brain development?
Yes.
And can you describe that? What adolescent brain development, what the new science has learned about adolescent brain development?
Well, we like to believe that the brain is all set at a very early point, but the new science shows that the brain actually is developing greatly in the earliest years. From 0 to 3, there's a lot of development going on, and then in the adolescent years, the main development is going on, where the brain is busy trying to develop in the frontal lobe, the front portion, in the areas of judgment, decision-making, patience, kindness, and those sorts of things that are all more higher level and more abstract. And the new science is showing that the brain of young people versus the brain of a mature adult, stopping at around the middle 20s or so, is different and not ready to go prime time. Prime time meaning an adult, fully responsible brain. So I can say, having been a young person, and not being one now, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I can say, having been around young people, including my own children and many others, that makes even more sense to me just by looking at the behavior and then remembering my own.
And let me finish up with your CV. I apologize. I'll go back to that. Right now, are you licensed to work in any areas in Wisconsin?
I'm licensed as a psychologist. I'm also licensed as an attorney, but I don't practice law.
And let me ask you this. Do you have any teaching positions?
Yes, what I do at Mendota now is I'm the director of Mendota. I've been at Mendota about 37 years, and for the last 17 years I've been the director, and I can explain that if that's necessary. But I also teach at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I have been doing that for about 25 years. My classes are always about something having to do with psychology and law, social science and the law, forensic psychology, mental health law, that sort of thing. And I teach undergraduates right now I'm teaching a course called Psychology, Law, and Social Policy. And I also teach in the law school law school is usually 3 years if you go full-time. Third-year law students have elective courses where they can select, and I teach a course there called Mental Health Law for lawyers that are interested in how mental health and the law work.
And I believe you said you're currently employed at Mendota.
Yes.
And I want to go over again with you. What's your position there?
So currently my position is the director, and my career over the 30-plus years has roughly been split with about 10, 12 years with patient care, so much more me and patient directly on units. The second half was more middle management, which means being the supervisor of a particular unit with other people who do the same thing, and also doing that kind of work with patients. And then the last third or so has been more administrative or clinical administrative, which has to do with the operations of the whole hospital.
And have you yourself published any works?
Yes.
And have you yourself done any presentations?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, at this point, I'm asking the court to allow me to move in Exhibit Y.
Any objection?
No.
Okay, proceed.
Dr. Van Rybroek, have you ever testified as an expert in court before?
Yes, I have.
And have you ever testified as an expert in court on the issue of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect?
Yes, I have.
Okay. In your experience, have you ever been found to be not qualified to testify as an expert on the issue of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect?
No.
And throughout the years that you've been practicing and you've been requested to do evaluations for purposes of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, have you been hired by the state to do them?
Yes.
And have you also been hired by the defense to do reports?
Yes.
And when you've done those reports in the past, have you always come to a conclusion that either the state, when they hired you, had hoped that you would come to?
No, I regularly say the wrong things to people.
Okay. And same question about from the defense perspective, have you always reached the conclusion that the defense has been hoping that you would reach?
I seem to say the wrong things to the defense as well.
In this case, though, you were not hired by the prosecution, you were not hired by the defense. How did you get involved in this case?
I'm not really sure. I was hired by the court, but I don't know exactly how that happened, to be honest with you.
Judge, I'm going to ask permission to offer Dr. Van Rybroek as an expert in assessing whether or not a person meets the standard for not guilty by reason of disease or defect.
I'll permit the testimony to go forward.
Doctor, I want to go back to your occupations a bit, because you work at University of Wisconsin-Madison as a professor, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And I know that one of the other witnesses, Dr. Michael Caldwell, he works at the same place.
Yes.
Okay. In your field, does it, I mean, I'm assuming that when you work in the field of psychology, you meet other psychologists.
Yes.
Okay. When you work in the field of psychology, it's common that you can actually work in the same area or same employer as other psychologists.
Yes.
Okay. When you were ordered by the court to do your evaluation, did you consult with Dr. Michael Caldwell about what you were requested by the court to do?
No, I did not.
Were you provided a copy of Dr. Michael Caldwell's report before you formed your opinions and submitted your report to the court?
No,
Okay. And when you submitted your report, did you send it to me?
I did not. I sent it to the court.
Okay. And when you completed your report, I contacted you because I wanted to talk to you about what your report said. What did you do?
I guess I didn't answer you. I wrote to the court and said, what do you want me to do here?
Okay. So you wrote to the court and asked for permission to even talk to me after you completed your report.
Yes.
You work with Dr. Caldwell. You guys have even published things together, and you've done presentations together, right?
Yes, we have.
Okay. At any time while you were preparing your report, drawing your conclusions, did you talk to him about what you were thinking about the case?
No.
Dr. Melissa Westendorf, she also evaluated Anissa. Prior to sending your report to the court, prior to reaching your conclusions, did you talk to Dr. Westendorf?
No.
Prior to submitting your report to the court, did you get a copy of Dr. Westendorf's report?
I did not.
After you submitted your report to the court, you did receive a copy of Dr. Westendorf and Dr. Caldwell's reports.
Yes, I did.
And do either of those reports cause you to change any opinions or conclusions you reached in your report?
No, they did not.
Okay, so let's talk about your contact with Anissa. And I want to have you look at Exhibit Z.
While he's looking at Exhibit Z, I just want to point out that this is an important distinction. He's not a psychiatrist or psychologist, excuse me, he's a psychologist hired by not hired, but retained by either the state or the defense. The court appointed him. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I got a little distracted. I got stopped by my granddaughter asking me a question, and so I missed part of this. But I believe, if memory serves, both Dr. Hold on, I want to make sure I say his name correctly. Just a second.
And can you identify Exhibit Z?
Yes, this is the report that I wrote
Hold on.
after evaluating Anissa and looking at the documentation around the case that brought me to evaluating her.
Van Rybroek, Dr. Van Rybroek. Okay, if I remember correctly, Dr. Caldwell was called in because both girls needed to undergo competency evaluations. And so the court appointed this doctor and the other doctor, if I remember, and Dr. Caldwell. They're both appointed by the court, not retained by the state or not retained by the defense. So they're like separate. I just wanted to make that distinction. It took me a lot longer than I intended to. All right, here we go.
I want to go to page 2 of your report. On page 2, it talks about things that you did. It's titled Database. When did you meet with Anissa?
I saw her, I have to look at this, in September of 2016, September 29th, or
Okay.
September 29th, yes.
And I noticed that on page 9, there was a reference to seeing her on October 29th, but October 29th of 2016. But if it says that, that was a typing error.
Yes, I'm sorry that I somehow have the wrong date there.
Okay. And when you met with her, how long did you meet with her?
About 4.5 hours.
And you met with her. Did you tell her why you were meeting with her?
I did.
And did you think she appeared to understand what you were talking about?
She did seem to understand why I was there and understood the purpose of the meeting.
Did she appear to have any concerns about like orientation to place, person, time when you were meeting with her?
No, she was well aware of what year it was and those sorts of things, what was going on in the world, what was going on in her experiences there at the county detention center.
Okay. Did she appear to have any concerns about being preoccupied with internal stimuli?
No.
Okay. Was she able to provide you with any information about her social history?
Yes.
Okay. And did she appear to be cooperative during your contacts with her?
Yes, she was.
You know, you first met with her, you said, September 29, 2016. So that was over 2 years after the offense was committed.
Yes.
Did that present any issues for you?
It's a challenge. It's a little bit hard in NGI insanity cases because the requirement there in the law is to try to understand the person's mind or their mental state at the time of the alleged crime. So it's a challenge for anybody involved in this kind of an evaluation because it's always later, of course. And what we're trying to do is go backwards in time, which is difficult. So I have to say that this is a standard challenge in this work.
Okay. But you did try to compensate for that, didn't you?
Yeah, the best that I know to be done, of course, is to interview the person for their memory and so forth, but then there's a lot of information that is collected in police reports and statements and interrogation tapes and that sort of stuff. That's all closer to the time.
Okay. And is that information that, like, it's normal for psychologists to seek and review when doing an evaluation for purposes of not guilty by reason of mental disease and defect?
Yes, absolutely normal to do that.
Okay. And in your report, page 2, under the database area, so those are things that you all reviewed, it lists some reports by Dr. Jurek, Dr. Rosky, Dr. Caldwell, Dr. Kavanaugh. Those were other reports that were done, but they were not related to the not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect issue, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you reviewed those for purposes of trying to get a sense of probably what she told other professionals early on when she met with them. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I misspoke. Those other doctors, I think, conducted the competency. See, let me go back and find that timeline of events, and let me just be quiet until I find that. Give me just un momentito.
Yes.
You also, did you review her statement to the detective, Detective Trusani?
I don't remember the name of the detective, but is this the person who did the interrogation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and you reviewed it in its entirety?
Yes,
And it's the video recorded interrogation that lasts 3 hours, correct?
yes, yes,
And did you also review the video recorded interrogation of Morgan?
I did.
And did you also review the interview that was done of the victim, Payton?
Yes,
And that was in police reports, right? The detective summarized it?
yes, as well.
Okay. You, I just want to ask you this. Based on your knowledge that you've gained working as a psychologist, well, let me strike that question. There was something I wanted to clarify from some testimony that was presented yesterday. What does the DSM, what is the DSM?
The DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's the best way to say it is it's a guidebook for professional people who are trying to figure out what might be wrong with somebody, so the diagnosis. And the reason to say guidebook is that many professional people, psychiatrists, psychologists, researchers with that sort of background, come together to agree on ultimately what each diagnosis means and what the criteria are for that diagnosis. So it is the manual that helps professional people who are trying to understand mental health troubles that they go to, so that there's a consistent view of what it is or what it is not. So it says in order to be X, you have to have number 1, number 2, number 3, or you have to have 4 of 6 or whatever, and the professional should go and look at those criteria and compare it to the case in front of them to help reach a diagnosis. Does that help?
It does. And so what you're trying to prevent is someone, a doctor, coming up with a diagnosis out of like thin air.
Yeah, exactly. It's trying to be reasonably consistent about mental health, which is very sort of soft and squishy at times. It's hard for people to agree on what is wrong, if anything is wrong, and those things we know from life. So this is trying to get a playing field that everybody agrees, at least let's look at this and talk about this against whatever the issue is with the person.
Okay. After you met with Anissa and you reviewed the collateral information that's listed on page 2 of your report, did you conclude that she met a diagnosis for a mental disease or disorder?
I did.
And what diagnosis did you indicate that she has?
So need to. So as you might imagine in my work, what a forensic person is often is skeptical. I don't believe people a lot, and I have to spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. And in the end, I get to have an opinion in a court of law, and I get that it's an opinion. So I say that as the groundwork here because I often start with, I don't know if anything's wrong with a person, and I wouldn't want somebody to decide something's wrong with me just because I'm in the office. So I just start that way. And then because of my experience, I guess, and legal training, I start to look for evidence of what might be wrong. And in this case, without needing to, unless you want me to go through this more carefully, with that as the background, I thought that Anissa, at the time, not in front of me right then so much, although there were still elements there, but at the time, she had a delusional disorder. So a delusion is a fixed belief. If I say I'm the King of Spain, and you brought me the King of Spain and told me this is the real King of Spain, I would not believe you because I have a delusion. In my mind, I believe I'm the King of Spain and you brought me the false King of Spain, or you're part of the conspiracy to show me how wrong I am and you're against me now too. So it's a fixed belief that is a false belief. And in Anissa's case, I thought she had a fixed and false belief that she shared with her friend Morgan. So we call that a shared delusion. And that at the moment of this terrible, tragic event, that she was confused and convinced that something real was going on with this very strange character called Slender Man, who she had been dunked in with her friend Morgan for several months repeatedly. And they had gone on something that one could call just an adventure in one way, if you don't want to think of it as a mental illness, or she moved from fantasy to more than fantasy to a delusion, so on a line. So something like that, I believe, is what happened in her case. It wasn't immediate. It was gradual, more like a glacier than it was a big bang, a thunderstorm, or a lightning bolt. It was something that gradually got into her head along with her friend, and they became together confused about what was going on there, and they morphed or changed or moved into the world of mental health for the most important moment here, and the moment here is the terrible event in and of itself. And I came to that conclusion after reading all this paper and watching her on video, which was much closer to the time, as you know, or will know if you haven't seen the video, and then in meeting with her and talking to her about the whole thing. And I have to say that when I met with her, so this is some 2 years later, I still could feel sort of the leftovers of that, but the leftovers are more that confusion, not really sure, putting it more into a religious demon. This is Satan talking. It's not really Slender Man. It was Slender Man was the image of somebody who was representing the devil, if you will. And I saw her last week, a week ago, today actually, and I still could feel that coming off her. And she said those words to me, because you can imagine if you go through something like this, from her point of view, you're trying to understand it yourself as well. Terrible as it is for everybody else, it's also terrible for the person. So my job in this case is to understand the person accused of the crime, who now is saying, I didn't know what I was doing at that time.
I want to keep listening because I'm really curious. I need to understand how he got to this point. What evidence? I know that he took a look at everything in totality, okay? And I understand that. But I need to understand, at least on a summary level, some of the evidence that pointed to her not only having this shared delusion with Morgan, but that shared delusion was such that she could not conform her conduct to the law. I think that there's stronger evidence of Morgan not being able to conform her conduct to the law, but I need to understand what Anissa's is, because there's something missing there for me. I'm not saying that she doesn't have all of the things that she's been diagnosed with. I'm not qualified to really question that. I'm not qualified. I need to understand what evidence there is that she has this, but that's not that it's to such an extent that she couldn't conform her behavior. It's not that I don't believe that she has it. And also this, Patricia, this is another thing too. Patricia wants to know, why would she be susceptible to entering into a shared delusion? I want to know all of those things. This is where I get this is where it's frustrating for me when it comes to the law and trials, because these are really, really important details. Okay. In my opinion. And if I'm sitting on the jury and my only job is to render a verdict about whether or not this person is not guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect, mental illness or mental defect. I can't remember how they put it, whatever. You know what I'm talking about, an NGRI. But those are details that I feel like we need to like a jury needs to have. But, maybe we'll get those. Let's hope. Okay.
And I still feel that in its own way I think it's 3.5 years later today.
And you did say that when you saw her in 2016, and you saw her like a week ago, she was trying to divorce herself a bit from that delusion. Is that something that's common or uncommon in this situation?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say divorce. I would say she does what we all do when something terrible happens. And if we're involved in doing something terrible in our lives, we reconstruct what it was about. We rationalize it, we explain it, we take a little bit off of our own responsibility, and we change it. And our memory changes and other information changes, and it's not exactly the same as it was then. In her case, she was caught in like a whirlpool of really dumb, really bad judgment, and just was drawn into that and lost touch with her ability to stop herself. So the law says the person in insanity, the person has to have a mental illness, a mental disease or defect, and they have to either not appreciate the difference between right and wrong or not be able to control or conform their behavior to the law. And in her case, I think even at the time, she knew it was wrong. She knew the difference between right and wrong, but even so, she could not stop herself at the moment that mattered most because she was convinced that this character, who was a fantasy in our minds today, was not a fantasy, but was real in her mind, and that he would kill her and that he would kill her family and people that she loved in place of, in reaction to her not following through with this whole crazy thing about becoming a proxy for him.
You know, see, I'm moved. This is where it is for me. How real could that delusion have been? Because I'm really hung up on the email between her and Morgan, where she apologizes to Morgan for lying and faking. I think Morgan refers to them as tics, and saying that she saw Slender Man. I mean, that obviously came prior to that email happened prior to the murder, or to the attempted murder, I should say, excuse me, to the attempted murder. So this is where I need to understand from this witness, and I'm particularly interested in this witness because he was retained by the court. The court appointed him separate from other psychologists that might have evaluated Anissa for either the state or for the defense.
For him to do whatever he wanted to do. That's what she believed. That's what I thought was true to her at that time, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now I want to refer you to page 2 of your report. At the top of it, the third line from the top. You, in order to assist yourself with doing this evaluation, you consulted the statute and the jury instructions covering the not guilty by reason of mental disease and defect plea.
Yes, I did.
And at the top of page 2, you quoted that the jury instructions indicate that the impairment of mind that has to be there, whether it's enduring or transitory, must substantially affect the mental or emotional processes of the defendant at the time of the alleged offense. And you are saying the law says, what was she like when this happened, not what she's like today.
Yes. So the law says at the time. That's really important for an evaluator to look at. At the time, I can't actually go into a human being's mind and become them, but I have to do my best to try to become them in the sense of trying to understand the world the way they saw the world at the time. And the comments in the Wisconsin jury instruction say that I'm looking for whether there is an impairment of the mind, but the key words here is the impairment can be, it says, either transitory or enduring. Enduring is long-lasting, it's obvious, and it's a chronic, terrible condition. But transitory is, it can be just now, just in the moment. And the instructions say it can be one or the other, it can be that. So she was more in the transitory time in the way that I tried my best to explain it. In that moment, it was temporary and it was terrible, and it was a delusion that was very bad, that influenced her more than she could control. In other words, she couldn't conform her conduct to what we would expect her to conform her conduct to. As a result of this crazy connection with her friend and the fantasy of this character on the internet and everything that had to do with that.
See, you know what else I want to know? I would really like to know from Morgan's perspective. Remember when Anissa was in the interrogation room and she was explaining that she had some sort of breakdown and she just, went at Morgan and said, you wanted to do this. She said, I sort of blamed Morgan for everything. I would really like to know what Morgan's version of that conversation went like. Because the way that Anissa is describing it and how she starts that story is very, very abruptly. And it makes me wonder. I'm always of the belief that the truth, when there's two people who are involved in a set of events, good or bad, right? Doesn't really matter whether it's good or bad. But in this situation, this was a terrible set of events. But I always believe that the person that both people are retelling the conversation from their own perspective, the way that they remember it. But the truth is really somewhere in the middle of both of those. And I'm a little irritated with the lead detective who interviewed Morgan, because I feel like there was much more that could have been gained from that interview had he just asked, had he been patient. Morgan did try to offer information, and there were many times when he shut it down. And I don't know. I would like to know those things.
Okay. And you also quoted some other language from the jury instruction. On page 1, towards the bottom of the last paragraph, it says that in Wisconsin, selected conditions or circumstances have been specifically excluded as not supporting the definition of mental disease or defect. Temporary passion prompted by revenge, hatred, repeated criminal or otherwise antisocial conduct, voluntarily induced temporary mental states brought on by intoxication by drugs or alcohol. And why was that significant and important for you?
Well, because I teach this so much, I know that the average American who doesn't do this work believes that 40 to 60%, depending on the surveys, 40 to 60% of people who commit crime say, I was crazy at the time. So like I'm going to get me an attorney to help me get off, right? That's what we think. But I know from the research about it that actually only 1% of people who have committed a crime or been charged with a crime claim they were not guilty by reason of insanity at the time. And of those 1%, about a quarter, 25%, are successful. So even 3/4 of that 1% are by judge or jury not found, not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. So 1/4 of 1%. So last year, there were about 110,000 felony cases in this state, and there were about 400 cases where the person, through the legal system, said, I was not guilty because I was mentally ill at the time. And of those cases, only about 100 or so went all the way through and were successful. So very similar to the national statistic, 25, 30%. So this language, I believe, is to help the court and the judge and jury understand that we are not talking about cases where people were super mad at their spouse or somebody else, or super drunk, or super whatever it is that isn't good. It's just not mental illness. It's just a terrible and unfortunate moment where something bad happens at the other end of it, where we don't want people to say, well, I didn't know what I was doing. Well, maybe you didn't, but you should have. That's different. And so this is the language to rule that out rather than to rule it in, because we'd all like to, at the time we do something terrible, have a way to get out of it, I guess, in our own mind. So that's why it's there.
And did you consider these exclusions when you
did.
were assessing Anissa's situation?
I did, and I had to look at the one related to her case because it says a temporary passion prompted by revenge, hatred, repeated criminal or otherwise antisocial conduct, because the word temporary is in there. So was there a passion of some kind? And there was a strange sort of emotional connection there that she had with her friend Morgan, because they were friends. And she someplace here, somebody said she was desperate to have her as a friend. And so there was a pure relationship there that one had to consider, and I did consider that, and I do think that was part of this, but it doesn't account for it. It was part of this weird, they were yoked together, they were connected together in some kind of a shared way that was influential, and we know from research about the adolescent brain that peers influence each other tremendously. In other words, if she was on her own, she probably wouldn't have done this at all, but she wasn't on her own. She was with somebody else. That's the way it happened in this case. And the influence of a peer with another peer similar age is tremendously powerful in the adolescent brain that reacts to that kind of stimulation, way different than, say, a 35-year-old.
I agree with that.
Looking at the same material on the internet.
I agree with that. And there's a lot of, not just his testimony, but there's a lot of data that supports that. It's, sort of this, I think they call it like pack mentality. And, people sometimes think a pack needs to be, like a bigger group of people, but it actually doesn't. I mean, 2 people can be enough. And I do think, and it's also referred to as like this perfect storm of events. And I do agree with that when it comes to teenagers, particularly adolescents, that is heightened. It's harder to as an adolescent get away from peer pressure. So, I mean, I do understand. I do agree with that. I also agree that there is something very, very wrong with both of the girls. I'm not like, it's where, when it comes to, though, that Anissa was not capable of conforming her behavior to the law, that's where the question is with her for me.
So, Doctor, let's talk about that. Based on your knowledge that you've gained working as a psychologist primarily with children, does a child behave like an adult?
Sorry, I have to drink water. Sometimes they behave like an adult, and sometimes we sure wish, those of us who have kids or are around kids, we wish they would be like little adults. But lots of times they don't behave like an adult. And how do we just remember your own life and look at kids around you. They're not adults, they're kids. So sometimes we do a pretty good job of civilizing them, and lots of times we keep them within the boundaries, but we understand that they're kids. And so they don't behave in the same way as adults. Why? Because they're kids.
So is there a difference in how, like from a cognitive standpoint, a child would differ from an adult, or 12-year-old would differ from a 15-year-old?
Yes. So I'm not a neuroscientist. A neuroscientist is an actual brain specialist. So I want to say that to you, but I also know some about this, that our brain is basically a big reward system, and we react to rewards that we get. And our brain is developed from the back to the front over about 4 million years, the Homo sapien brain. And the front of the brain is what develops last. And the front of the brain is the area of the brain that has to do with judgment and decision making and making sense within whatever the rules of society are. And it takes till about the early 20s to the mid 20s to get all the way there. So that means the inner brain, the much older primitive brain, is interested in the rewards, and the rewards come in out of neurochemicals, lots of times dopamine. So dopamine is a little chemical, a neurotransmitter that squirts when the brain is excited. And the brain doesn't really have a value system, it just gets excited. So if you put a drug inside a brain, the brain's like, oh, I like that if it's a good drug. And if you put something exciting inside a brain that the brain is looking at in the world that is not a good idea, like driving a car fast, the brain likes that. And a juvenile, an adolescent, has more brain activity in things that are exciting when they are an adolescent. And there are studies that show like if you get rewards of sugar, we all like sugar because sugar candy tastes good and that stuff. The brain is more activated in an adolescent. And if you have a reward of money, because we all like money because we need money for stuff, the brain is more activated in an adolescent. The adult brain also activates, but the adolescent brain really activates. And if you put young people in front of a driving simulator to learn how to drive, they actually crash more. We know they crash more by statistics, right? They crash more when there are peers next to them because they're busy doing stupid stuff, because their brain is actually excited about all sorts of things and they're not paying attention. So these are good experiments to show us that the adolescent brain is busy developing but not ready to go. It's sort of trying to catch up to a body that may look quite adult in size, but it's not ready to go. It is really working on it. It is developing. So another way to say it is the brain of a young person has much more of an accelerator and not very good brakes. So it's like, whoa, and anybody who's honest about it knows they've been there, and maybe some people are, by the grace of God, I was like that. So we all know this, and the brake is what's developing, and it takes a long time for us to get there as an adult.
And some adults don't even have, it's all gas, no brakes. So the thing for me with all of this, I find his testimony and his knowledge and his insight fascinating because, yes, we're talking about this specific case, right? But I also want to have that conversation, the bigger conversation about what do we do with children in the justice system? What do we do with violent children, violent and mentally ill children in the justice system? Because there is, I think, right? Ideally, I don't think all children or human beings in general, but let's just talk about children, right? I don't think that all children are incapable of reform, okay? But I also think that how much reform and punishment could Anissa and Morgan really have when you think about the short, I know 7 years sounds like a very long time, but it's not. It's a drop in the bucket. And the fact of the matter is that even though it was 7 years, they're still incredibly young and their frontal lobes aren't even yet still fully developed. And so if we're supposed to be using the justice system as a punishment, right? But these girls weren't just sent to prison, which would be punishment only. they were sent to a facility, a secured facility. So they were supposed to be treated and reformed and as well as punished. But if their frontal lobes are not completely developed, how do we know? Oh, I'm sorry, Need. I hope you feel better, babe. Thanks for being here. I don't know. There's a lot of still questions for me that are unanswered and probably still will be unanswered. But let's keep going.
And that's sort of the basic brain business that has to do with child and adolescent development. Now, the other question was, what about a 12-year-old versus a 15-year-old? The younger the brain, the less ability to stop oneself, to have a filtering system, an editing system, and so forth. So this is in general. Presumably, the 12-year-old brain has less good braking than the 15-year-old brain, but the 15-year-old's not so good either most of the time.
And that level of development of a 12-year-old at that point in their lives, does that affect their abilities in terms of impulse control, the ability to resist peer influence?
Yes, that's all that front part of the brain that has to do with judgment, and bad judgment is what's happening when things are going wrong there.
Okay. Is that something that you factored into your evaluation of Anissa?
I did.
Doctor, I want to show you a couple clips from Anissa's interview with the detective. Judge, I'm going to show clip 10 from Exhibit F.
That's F1.
Oh, F1.
Well, I think F is the disc.
We have to kill Bella today. And I was like, but can't we see another do it tonight? Because I was still kind of scared and kind of hopeful.
Scared and kind of hopeful. What do you mean by that?
Like, I was scared because I would never see my family again. And B, I was kind of hopeful to prove that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't seeing things. Because even I saw Slender a few times. I think that was probably my mind playing tricks on me.
When was this before the party that you saw Slender? You've seen him before?
Twice. Once, well, they were both on a bus. We ride the same bus to town school. So we were talking on the bus. I look out the window and I see this supposed thing standing like this with tendrils, looks exactly like a tree. They're going like that. And I told Morgan, and so I actually thought that he was real because I saw him.
And so, Doctor, I just want to first ask you, is this the video that you reviewed of Anissa's interrogation by the detective?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and you watched that interrogation in its entirety, correct?
I did, yes.
And she says there that she saw Slender Man before the offense, right?
Yes.
And how did that factor into your opinion that she did have that belief, that delusional belief in Slender Man before this occurred?
So I can't actually tell where this particular clip was in the, I think it was about 3 hours or so.
Right.
But I have to tell you what remember I said, I don't believe a lot of this stuff. I actually have to work toward that. And what impressed me, if it wasn't this clip, it was somewhere early on that she started to talk about this crazy stuff about Slender Man. And so that impressed me. Because if a person does a bad thing, they're going to reconstruct it in some way where it's going to be less bad. If they can't get out of it, they're going to somehow explain it in a way that they're going to be a hero in their own story in some way. And she didn't do that. And it was really impressive to see early on, she's scared, she's 12. She's scared, she's confused. She's got a detective sitting across from her now after all of this has stopped. And she's trying to explain, well, this is what happened. And of course, the detective's like, me, who's Slender? What is that all about? That makes no sense in the world. So the detective's doing a nice job. What is that all about? And here's Anissa trying to explain this guy. And she says things like tendrils. And I think I saw him, I think she said out of the bus or after she had these flash visions or something, or she wasn't sure, like that. So she's struggling with that. And that was impressive to me because it was so early. Why? Because the issue is at the time, and this is so much closer to the time than when I saw her 2 years later and read all that paperwork about it.
You know, I'm going to okay, so Chicken Shite says, how did this expert not know she was lying about seeing Slender Man? I hope that the state asks that question because I would like to know that answer. I would like to know. I want to know that answer. I want to know that answer, and I do think that I disagree a little bit on this assessment, which is hard for me because this guy's obviously far more educated than I am. This is his specialty, all of the things, right? But I do think that, and this is where Dr. B's notes are going to come in, because I have a feeling that when he is talking about this case in a teaching setting, right? I would imagine that he talks about it differently, and he can say, okay, so you see how she says, because he's referred to her as sort of not minimizing her her involvement in it, right? And I would imagine that in a classroom setting that he would be able to give examples in this interrogation video where you can differentiate between she's taking accountability or the way that he's describing this, right? I that's the only part that I'm really interested in hearing about his evaluation in this teaching setting. So, all right, here we go.
About her. So it mattered to me.
I want to ask you about, that design of the website. Did you get a chance to view the Creepypasta website?
I did, but it was some time later, and I added that into the report.
Okay. And did the design of the website that you saw, did that have an effect on your opinion about whether or not she suffered from that delusional belief in Slender Man at the time?
Yeah, it did.
And how?
Well, so this is so strange to say it again, but like I really try to become the other person. So I try to, in my very fumbling way, because I don't travel in these worlds in the internet, try to imagine what that was, and I read the paragraph that was the intro at the time.
Hang on, I just want to acknowledge Crystal. Crystal says, I know someone with a history of being in Winnebago Mental Health Institute, and it's not a walk in the park. It's scary and horrible. And I imagine that it is. I'm not suggesting, and I hope that you didn't take it this way. I don't think that being in a secured facility like that is a walk in the park. And I would imagine that it is tremendously scary. I am just very interested in the bigger picture here, the bigger conversation. How do we, as a society in the United States, how do we deal with children in the criminal justice system? How do we deal with children who are violent and mentally ill in the criminal justice system? How do we balance punishment, right, for doing something wrong and reform? Because I have to say, it's my opinion overall, not just with not just with children, but with adults as well, that we're not doing a very good job either way. And I would like to see that change. Edith, thank you very much for joining memberships. I appreciate that. Welcome to the ward. Thank you for supporting me and the channel very, very much. I appreciate that. All right, I didn't mean to click Nightbot. Let's get back to it. Let me rewind just a tiny bit.
Struggling with that, and that was impressive to me because it was so early. Why? Because the issue is at the time, and this is so much closer to the time than when I saw her 2 years later and read all that paperwork about her. So it mattered to me.
I want to ask you about, that design of the website. Did you get a chance to view the Creepypasta website?
I did, but it was some time later, and I added that into the report.
Okay. And did the design of the website that you saw, did that have an effect on your opinion about whether or not she suffered from that delusional belief in Slender Man at the time?
Yeah, it did.
And how?
Thank you very much, Tosh, for gifting a membership. I appreciate that. And Chicken Shite is the one who got it. Congratulations. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, babe. Thank you for supporting me and the channel. Much, much appreciated.
Well, so this is just strange to say it again, but like I really try to become the other person. So I try to, in my very fumbling way, because I don't travel in these worlds in the internet, tried to imagine what that was, and I read the paragraph that was the intro at the time, and it was really creepy, but it was also, I think I said the word alluring. It's sort of, there's a part of me that was drawn in by it. Just like when we do this, we go to scary, creepy movies for the purpose of being scared. That's what we do, and I felt a little bit scared, to tell you the truth. And I could in my own mind, I'm not trying to be me, I'm trying to be her, it's hard to be somebody else. In my own mind, I started to feel, imagining that I'm 12 and a half, ooh, there's something about this. And then what I did, because of what I read and in talking to her, is I pushed repeat a lot of times. This is what I meant when I said dunking. And they talked to each other, and they did all this a lot of times like that. And then I saw, because this tweaked me a little bit, this all became a big deal nationally, and they put a caveat, they put a little thing in there later saying, if this is okay, they being whoever does these things, there is a line between fiction and reality, and it's up to you to realize where the line is. We are a literature site, not a satanic cult. And I thought, that's interesting for me to read now in retrospect after all of this. And I said in my paragraph, it's difficult with the mental capacity of a 12-year-old to know the line, to realize the line between fiction and reality. I just think that's difficult. And if you're in that dunking, repetitious cycle, it gets even more so. And if you are in that with another person who is of similar age and interest and promoting it in its own way, feeding off each other, it gets even more difficult to realize the difference between reality and fantasy as a 12-year-old.
Okay. And that warning that you just referenced, where was that warning? Where did it come from?
It was somewhere on that site.
And do you remember what came after that warning?
What I remember is there's a whole there are all sorts of links that go all sorts of places having to do with this topic of either Slender Man or characters of that ilk that Anissa and her friend were looking at.
And is that a warning that's now on the Creepypasta website?
I would not know about today, but it was then.
Okay, and that was a warning that you saw that was on there after the date of defense. I think you said that.
I believed it was, yes.
You met with Anissa again in September 26, I believe, 2016. And when you spoke with her, were there statements that she made to you, and I'll refer you to page 7, that and 8, that specifically caused you to believe that she still held on to some of the delusional belief systems that you talked about before? And that, let me just correct myself, that would be on page 9 and page 10 of your report.
Okay.
Also page 11.
Is there something on those pages you want to direct me to, or?
Oh, that's what I'll do. On page 11, the third full paragraph, and it says under query, could you have stopped yourself from doing all of this to Bella? She says, I could have stopped myself, but if I did, I would not have only risked being killed myself, but also my family being killed.
Correct.
And what did you take from that?
Well, so here I was. So what's happening is the examiner's trying to understand the mental health issues there, if they are there, and looking for it. But a forensic person also knows about the law, so they're thinking about the appreciation, the ability to appreciate the difference between right and wrong, which is sometimes called the cognitive standard. So I was thinking, why don't I just ask her this? Why don't I just ask her, well, did you know the difference between right and wrong? And she said I did, which just because she said that doesn't mean everything, but it means something. Some weight is given to that. And in the end, I said, well, I think she did, but she was, in her own mind, pinned. She was painted into a terrible corner where if she didn't continue with this terrible thing that happened, she would die, or her family would die. So she was in a terrible dilemma, a mental dilemma.
And what about the this next quote that you indicate? She says, when we were in the woods, I thought Morgan would kill me if I didn't do it because she would be part of Slender Man. Morgan would be a proxy, and Anissa would not be, and Morgan would be sent back to kill Anissa.
Yes.
Did that have an effect on your opinion about whether she was suffering from a delusional belief in Slender Man at the time?
Yes, because the driver here in the delusional belief was that they needed to do something terrible, to kill somebody in order to become a proxy. And a proxy is some kind of a helper, some kind of a servant to the Slender Man. And that even if she did not go through with it, she says then to me, then if Morgan did, Anissa would be the first victim. The Slender Man would tell Morgan, go and get Anissa or her family. So that's what I meant about feeling the dilemma of what do I do. So she knew it was wrong, but did it anyway for fear that she would die or her family would die.
And so she made a reference to believing that she or her family would be killed if she didn't go along with it. Did you see a reference to that in any of the other, like, collateral information that you read? For instance, any of the professionals, the doctor's reports that were completed and filed in prior years on the case?
I did. I think that was a fairly consistent statement or theme throughout many of the evaluations.
Okay, so when those other doctors saw her early on after this occurred, she was telling them that, first of all, she believed that she needed to become a proxy to join Slender Man. And we know Slender Man's not real, right?
Yes.
So that was the delusion. She was motivated by that.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And she also indicated that she needed to do this to become a proxy and to save her family and herself from harm. She had reported that to other professionals shortly after this occurred as well, correct?
Yes.
I did not directly ask you this, but part of your evaluation and assessment is to not only determine if she has a mental disease or defect, but you have to determine whether or not that mental disease or defect had a substantial effect on her ability to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the law.
Yes.
And let's go over that again. What did you find, and what information led you to conclude the way you concluded?
So in terms of the conclusion, I thought that there was a mental illness here, a mental disease or defect, that mental disease or defect was a shared delusional disorder, that there was a connection between that disorder and the behavior having to do with her responsibility, which is the second part of insanity. I thought that she did know the difference between right and wrong, so she doesn't meet that prong, in my opinion, but that she could not control her behavior, which in the law is called conformity, to the degree that we want her to in society, and she could not do it because of the shared delusion. I also included as part of that, and a big part for me, was her very young age, which is all about an immature brain development, which is all about bad judgment and poor insight and inability to stop or control impulses to the degree that we would like people to do.
And the opinions that you testified to today, do you hold those opinions to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
I do.
Judge, I want to move in exhibits Y and Z into evidence.
All right, thank you. I think we've already moved into admission Y, so then Z would be the report. Any objection? All right, proceed.
Judge, I don't have any other questions.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Doctor, I'm going to pick up right where you left off. You said a big part of this meeting was her age, right?
Yes, that was a big factor in it, yes.
And you understand that she's in the adult court system, correct?
Yes, I do.
And as a lawyer, you know that the law required she be charged as an adult with this homicide, correct?
Well, I know more than that, but I know that she's in the adult system, and that as an adult, she is an adult regardless of her age, according to the law, yes.
Had you been called upon to offer an opinion, would you have given the opinion that she should have been reverse waived back to juvenile court?
I didn't evaluate her for that, so it's really not proper to speculate on something I wasn't asked to do.
Well, you know everything about the case, right?
Well, no, I don't know everything about anything. So I do recognize that the court has an ability to reverse waive, and I know that she was not reverse waived in her circumstance.
And you're not willing to offer for us your opinion on whether she should have been or shouldn't have been?
No, that's...
Based on what you know?
Judge, that's been asked and answered.
Sustained.
But at least in terms of your consideration for your opinion on not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, for you, her age played a big part in that, correct?
Yes, it did.
I'm very confused based on your report and something Mr. Smith had indicated. You interviewed Anissa once?
Twice.
And those dates were September 29th and September 26th?
So in 2016, I messed up with one of the dates, and then a week ago, I think it was a week ago today.
Okay, let's go back to 2016. You have your report in front of you, right?
Yes.
Page 2 of your report indicates in the middle, clinical interview conducted on September 29th, 2016 for 4.5 hours in the Washington County Juvenile Detention Center. You
Yes.
see that?
Yes.
So you interviewed her on September 29th, right?
Yes.
And then on page 4 of your report, up at the top, the first full paragraph, it says Anissa was evaluated on September 26th, 2016 at the Waukesha, Washington County Detention Facility.
Yes, I would, and I can see below that too, the 26th. So I must have messed up on the dates, but I'd have to go back to my notes to make sure of what the dates are, but you're correct, they're not the same dates, so I understand your confusion.
And then later on in your report, it said October 29th. We kind of
Yeah.
covered that earlier, right?
Yes,
Okay. But it was just one date in 2016.
yes, I'm sorry, yes.
And then you went and interviewed her again on September 7th of 2017, correct?
I don't have that, but yes, I believe it was the 7th.
Well, you sent a letter to the court dated September 11th, 2017, indicating that that had occurred, right?
Yes,
And September 11th, 2017, that was the day the trial started, correct?
I don't know when the trial started.
Okay. And you testified that when you interviewed Anissa on September 7th, she made statements to you, right?
Yes,
And you authored no report or provided any of those statements to either the state or the defense, did you?
right, I did send a letter saying that I saw her and that I held the same opinion.
But there's nothing in there that indicates anything she told you, correct?
Correct,
And you understand as a lawyer that statements of a defendant in a criminal case are discoverable by both sides, correct?
correct?
And we don't know what she told you, do we?
I guess not.
You talked about Anissa was painted into this terrible corner. You remember that?
You mean today?
Right.
Yes,
And that was prior to the stabbing, correct?
yes. Well, I would say the whole circumstance was a terrible corner of some kind, yes.
And that certainly played a part in your opinion, correct?
Yes, and trying to understand her state of mind at the time.
I just wanted to say, please excuse the overlays. I know that Donna Adolescent is, that her hearing is going to make me make those faces. And so I felt they were necessary. And before I forget to do them, to upload them, I want to make sure that they're uploaded. So please excuse my overlay upload. It doesn't pertain to this particular trial. All right, here we go. Sorry about that, you guys.
And you told us that really at the time is the key issue, correct?
Yes, it is.
And statements made more recent to the time of the event probably are entitled to some more weight. Would that be fair?
Yes, I generally think that the time before, the time itself, and the time after, close in time, like you're suggesting, have the most power or the most influence.
One of the things Anissa told you was, we had some testimony about this earlier, that they had to walk 4,000 miles to get to the Nicolay Forest. Do you remember that?
Yes,
You reviewed the police reports, right?
yes.
I'm going to show you, Doctor, what's marked as Exhibit 5. Do you recognize that as a map that Anissa had sent to Morgan?
I recognize it as a map. I can't say I remember that Anissa sent it to Morgan right at this moment.
So are you aware of the email in the police reports that Anissa sent to Morgan saying that she had found that map and they could use that to find their way to the Nicolay Forest?
I'm not specifically recalling that. I remember there was a lot of discussion through email and otherwise having to do with planning of some kind related to the Nicolay Forest and the whole story.
And that map shows that it was only 206 miles, I believe, right?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
I don't have any other questions. Thanks, Judge.
All right, thank you. Redirect.
Dr. Van Rybroek, I want to clear up some, but I think there's some confusion. I know you are an attorney, right?
Yes, I am.
You don't represent the district attorney's office right now, do you?
I do not.
You don't represent Anissa, do you?
I do not.
Okay, you are working in your capacity as a psychologist, isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You would turn over discovery if you were representing one of the two parties, right? As a part of a discovery requirements, if you were an attorney representing Anissa or the state, you would turn over things.
I suppose I would. I've never done that because I've
Okay.
never actually done that.
Okay. Your notes, if the attorney for the district attorney's office had contacted you and said, turn over your notes, would you have turned over your notes?
Yes, I would.
If I had contacted you and said, Dr. Van Rybroek, turn over your notes, would you have turned over your notes?
Yes, I would.
Okay. If the court had contacted you, since the court appointed you to do this evaluation, and said, turn over your notes to both parties, would you have turned over your notes?
Yes.
I think you probably would have, if either side had contacted you to say they wanted your notes, you probably would have consulted with the court
I
first, right?
probably, yes, I probably would have.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Any further cross?
No.
All right, with that, Doctor, your time here is complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can step down.
All right.
Is Dr. Van Rybroek under subpoena?
Yes, he is.
Is
Judge, he
released?
released.
Any objections?
No.
All right, subpoena's released. Yeah, I'll take these. Thank you. Very good. There we go. With that, I think this is an appropriate time to take a recess, so we'll be in recess for about 15 minutes. You have further witnesses this morning?
Yes, Dr. Caldwell is coming in, and I think he may be running late. When I talked to Dr. Van Rybroek earlier today, he said that traffic was very foggy coming from Madison into Waukesha, so he was delayed, and I'm thinking Dr. Caldwell might be delayed as well. What we'll do is try to contact him during the break and see where he is.
All right. Well, let's, we'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Let's go to 10:30.
Judge, just for,
Yeah.
I guess, further discussion for today, I'm assuming Dr. Caldwell is the defense's last witness. The state is not anticipating calling any witnesses. I would assume then the court's plan would be to finish this today.
Well, if we could, we'll have a jury instruction conference. I've passed out instructions to you, so I'm thinking we may be that may not be as long as it could be. But if we could, I would try today. If we finish, let's say we start about 10:30, Dr. Caldwell would finish his testimony possibly before noon, but certainly maybe after lunch. We'd take some time to get organized, and then there would be time to do arguments and have the jury start deliberating. Any comments from Ms. Weier's case?
That's certainly possible, Your Honor. I don't know how long the jury instructions will take to read and all that, and if the court wanted to start with fresh minds in the morning for closings or not. I think that would depend on how long Dr. Caldwell took and how long the instruction conference was.
Well, it's something we can discuss. There's merit to doing it either way, and we can review that. All right, so yes, Mr. Smith.
There's one other issue. Exhibit E, I believe that's Anissa's interrogation. The court didn't want another copy of it provided, but the court wanted it to be referenced as the exhibit, I think A3 from the 2016, 2017, 2015 preliminary hearing. Is that how the court wants that to be entered in this case today?
Well, what I wanted on Exhibit E, I understood Exhibit E was actually really the disc from the prior hearing.
Right.
And if that's the case, it's okay to call it Exhibit E here, but I think we ought to identify it then as an exhibit, whatever it was from that prior hearing.
Okay.
So there's a consistent knowing chain of custody, if you will, of where that exhibit's been, so we know what we're talking about, and that there should be no changes made in the disc from that early date to now.
Right. Okay.
So if are you identifying Exhibit E then as the exhibit you noted?
Yes, it was the preliminary hearing held February 16, 2015 and February 17, 2015. It's Exhibit A3, and your clerk helped me with that yesterday. February 16, 2015 and February 17, 2015. It's Exhibit A3, and your clerk helped me with that yesterday, and I thank her for that.
All right. Any objections to that nomenclature being used from the state?
No.
All right, very good. So thank you for looking that up, and thank you to Ms. Jacks for assisting in that. With that, then we'll be in recess.
Judge, I'm going to move for the admission of number 5 that I showed.
Any objection?
Not at all.
Okay, received. All right, with that, we'll be in recess at least till 10:30. Good morning once again. We'll be back on the record in State versus Anissa Weier. The same appearances. Jury is not here. Jury is in the jury room. Let me ask Attorney Smith what status of his witnesses?
Well, Judge, we thought that Dr. Caldwell would be here this morning. We actually sent him an email asking him to be here this morning because we were moving along faster than we were anticipating. It looks like he did not receive the email, and so he's on his way, but my guess is he won't be here until after the noon hour. He's coming from Madison area.
All right. And there are, from the Ms. Weier's standpoint, there are no further witnesses.
That is correct, sir.
All right, all right.
And
Well-
I apologize profusely. I sent the email. Dr. Caldwell was very apologetic as well on the phone. He indicates sometimes they have some issues with the emails at Mendota, and that he expects that he will eventually receive it. But he is on his way. Fortunately, we had cell phone, so we were able to communicate. I should have followed up last night with a phone call as opposed to just relying upon the e-communication.
Well, we have sufficient time to be flexible, and court can address that. What that means, though, is on scheduling, I'm thinking that we'll use our time now to review the jury instructions and the verdict. Then come back at, say, 1:15. Now, he should be here by then?
He should, sir.
Well, let's be safe.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think 1:30 is a better time, I'll say 1:30.
Just to be safe with the fog, I don't know
All
whether
right,
it's
1:30,
lifted or not.
1:30.
I just
Then,
remember Jefferson when I lived there.
let's say it takes 2 hours, 3 hours, that could be 3:30, 4, depending upon how things go. I think our best approach is then to actually do the instructions and closing arguments and deliberations starting tomorrow at 8:30. Then everybody's fresh, and we'll proceed on that basis. Any comments from the state?
Yes, Judge, we're taking these jurors out of their lives for the entire week and put them up in a hotel. I would think him coming from Madison, there wouldn't be a reason why he couldn't be here by 12:30 or 12:45. We should start then. These jurors are sitting doing nothing until then, and if we did start then, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be likely to proceed to closing arguments and get this case to that jury this evening so they can begin deliberations, so we don't take any more time out of their lives. That's the state's position, Judge.
All right, thank you. That's a valid position. If Dr. Caldwell was actually here and we knew what the timing was, my position would be a bit different. But at this point, I'm trying to maintain a consistent and somewhat calm atmosphere for the purposes of the trial. In doing that, I accept that mishaps occur with witnesses and timing. In this case, we'll take Dr. Caldwell's situation at face value and we'll address him this afternoon. I want to make the jury comfortable, and in one sense to send them, to have them stay perhaps an extra day or two they might not care for it. On the other hand, the key for the court, and I believe for the parties and the public, is that the trial be held in an efficient and expeditious.
Choose to help you guys.
I do. Very good. Thank you. And then be seated. Pull up to the microphone, and then state your full name and spell your last name.
My name is Michael Caldwell. My last name is Caldwell.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Attorney McMahon.
Thank you. Dr. Caldwell, there should be a couple documents in front of you.
Yes.
One is marked A1. Can you tell me what that is?
Just a second. I want to show you guys something because this is the face I make when I know that this attorney is the one conducting the direct examination. I don't care for her. I'm sorry. I just don't. That's all. Ah, cripes.
I grew up in a little farm just outside Kansas City, so I went to Kansas State University for my undergraduate. I initially studied engineering, and then switched into a microbiology degree and finished with a bachelor's degree in life sciences in '76. And then I went straight into a master's program in counseling psychology and finished a degree in counseling psychology and worked as a psychotherapist then for about 8 years or so before I went back for a doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Denver. And I completed that in 1988.
And as a part of your educational background, were you required to do any internships?
Yes, I was on both the master's level and at the doctorate level.
Can you tell me a bit about those?
We don't need to hear that. He's an expert.
I had a couple of internships. One was.
And what do you mean when you say that? Why would you say that?
Well, I consider, the way I describe it, a child is someone who is up to the point where they enter puberty, they're a child, from the onset of puberty on, I consider them to be an adolescent up to about age 18. And that statutorily, that's when they are considered an adult. So that's the terminology I use.
Okay. And how is it that you determined that she was a child?
Well, first, just talking to her and looking at her, she was obviously very young. Second, in the records, we had a physical that she had completed with her physician. Just again, referring to my report, it was dated October of 2013, so a few months earlier. And in that, as part of a regular annual physical, a physician will rate what's called a Tanner scale, which is a scale that measures how physically mature the person is, and particularly as they go through puberty. It's a 5-point scale. Point 1 is when the person has no secondary sexual characteristics at all, a very young child. And point 2, this level 2, is when they're just beginning to show some physical maturation, but haven't quite entered into puberty yet. And she was scored as a scale 2 on the Tanner scale. So that's also a medical doctor indicating that she was still very immature, still had a long ways to go for maturity.
And why is it important to determine whether a person is a child, an adolescent, or an adult when you are assessing them for responsibility?
Well, there are certain common features in the thinking of prepubescent children that change as the person goes into adolescence, and there are other characteristics of adolescence that are different than the way children think, and also different than the way adults think.
How do you know this?
Well, we know this from a large body of research now over several decades, both studies of how people work out problems and handle problems in controlled situations. One of the more recent ones is how people deal with complicated, dangerous situations when driving. You put them in a driving simulator and manipulate the risk that they face and the red lights and those kinds of things. And we know that adolescents deal with those situations differently than young children, pre-adolescent children, and also adults. Particularly differences in how they handle having friends of theirs in the car and those kinds of things. So out of all of that research, 3 main characteristics were popped out for changes as an adolescent, and those are the ability to control and modulate emotions, the ability to kind of reason rationally about social situations and not be influenced by other people in social situations, and then just basic planning and the ability to solve problems and think in rational terms about complicated situations. All of those change fairly dramatically during adolescence. And in some ways, children are more similar to adults in terms of their resistance to the influence of peers than are adolescents. Adolescents are more susceptible to the influence of peers. And then, of course, young children also, prepubescent children, have a weaker, what's called a sense of reality. They have a weaker sense of what's real and what's not real, a weaker ability to distinguish the difference between those things. So they're likely to believe in Santa Claus and things like that, ghost stories, that type of thing. And as the person progresses through adolescence, they develop an improved sense of reality in a normal person.
Okay. Now, you mentioned studies involving simulators, things like that. Do we have ways of knowing actually whether the brain functions differently?
Yes, in the last couple of decades, with the development of the magnetic resonance imaging machine, this is a machine that allows for the first time to be able to look at what's going on inside of a person's brain without cutting their head open, which has obvious limitations. And so it's developed to the point where you can actually see what part of the brain the person is using to solve certain problems and to deal with certain situations. And so that has told us a couple of things about how what parts of the brain are being used to solve social problems and analyze complex situations. But also, I think one of the big surprises is that it has shown us that the actual physical structure of the brain changes fairly dramatically as the person goes through adolescence. This is now thought of as the brain being fully rewired during adolescence, reorganized in a number of ways. And so that's all stuff that we have learned about neurological changes that happen during adolescence.
And why is it important to take that sort of information into account when you're assessing the responsibility of an individual?
Because it's not unusual for a full-grown adult who's done a crime to use very poor judgment. And sometimes the difference between an adolescent and an adult is that the adult has the capacity to use good judgment. They've got the brain maturity and structures in place to use that. At other times, with adolescents, that's not always the case. Often their limited reasoning ability and planning and problem-solving ability is based on an actual weak capacity in the brain because it's not mature, it's not fully mature, it hasn't developed to the level of an adult.
Okay. And within the field of psychology, is there a way to sort of measure when you're looking at a person how their response is? It's not all just clinical judgment, right? There's a way to look at things and to determine what you're looking at, correct?
Yes, typically to do an evaluation, you do a clinical interview, of course, but typically you also do some testing in a number of areas to be sure that the test results are confirm what your clinical impressions are, or if they don't, to try to figure out why there's a difference there.
Okay. And did you perform any such tests on Anissa?
Yes,
in
I did.
2014?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I did a Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, which is the most widely used IQ test in the world. I also did, it's a broad kind of personality test of how the child is functioning and what sort of mental health problems they may have, called the Achenbach Youth Self-Report Scale. And then a brief symptom inventory, which is just a short symptom checklist that gives you a picture of how the person has been feeling in the last couple of weeks, so that you know whether they're having a particularly good or bad day when you interview them. And then an aggression questionnaire, which is a measure of how the person sees the world in terms of whether they see the world as a malicious place, a dangerous place, that kind of thing. And also whether they are someone who thinks that you just have to be violent periodically to achieve your goals or to defend yourself, that kind of thing. How much they endorse violence and have violent attitudes. And then the last was a Halstead-Reitan trail-making test, and it's got two parts, part A and B. And this is a brief neurological screening test that is sensitive to brain injury. That tells us, just screens out the possibility that that this person has had a brain injury, and that may account for some of their behavior.
Okay. What did you learn from the Wechsler?
From the Wechsler, she had compared. Now these scores compare to people the same age, so this would be compared to other 12-year-olds. She was above average. Now, if you compare her to an adult at that time, she was right about at the average. But compared to 12-year-olds, she had above average IQ, and particularly when it came to verbal skills, her ability to analyze things verbally and explain definitions of words and those kinds of things. But there was one area of weakness, and that was in what's referred to as processing speed. That's an area that's controlled by a part of the brain that's in the middle of the brain, and it has to do with how fast the person can pull together information and analyze it and produce an output. And that affects how well the person is going to be able to analyze complicated situations and problem solve when there's several things that they have to be thinking about at once. So for example, when you're driving down a road in a city during rush hour traffic, there's lots of things going on, pedestrians, lights, those kinds of things. All of those have to be analyzed on the fly with multiple changes in time. And a person with very severe processing speed deficits will have trouble with that. Her deficit in that area was not particularly severe, but it was striking compared to her other functioning. It was much lower than her other functioning.
What sort of things would a deficit in her processing speed indicate to you?
There's a couple possibilities. One possibility would be a brain injury or a tumor, but the Halstead-Reitan scale did not indicate anything like that. And in my interview with her, I also didn't see any soft signs of that kind of problem. More likely, in her case, would be two possibilities. One is that people who are depressed, if you've ever been a little depressed, your thinking slows down and it just becomes harder to process information. And so that's a likely possibility in her case. It's also common in people that have attention deficit disorder without hyperactivity. I didn't see any indications that she has attention deficit disorder in any other areas, and the school records also didn't show any indications of that. So the most likely explanation was that she was feeling depression at that time.
Okay. And so the Halstead you did to rule out brain injury because of the lowered processing speed.
Yes, actually, I do the Halstead or something like it routinely just because there's been occasions where I've evaluated someone who didn't seem to have a brain injury, and it turns out that they did. So I try to rule it out in every case.
Okay. After meeting with Anissa and completing the test we just discussed, did you review other materials, or did you review them before meeting with Anissa?
I mostly reviewed most of the material I reviewed before I met with her, but there has been a number of documents and things that have come in since then also.
Okay. Before you met with Anissa, do you recall what you reviewed?
Yes, I reviewed the medical record that I talked about before from our physicians. I reviewed the school records from the Waukesha School District and West Bend. I reviewed the police records and the petition related to this case. I also reviewed the DVD of her interrogation or questioning by the detective on the day of the incident, and also the DVD of Morgan Geyser's questioning. And then I don't recall whether I believe I saw the DVD of the victim, the interview with the victim after I met with Anissa.
I'm curious why Dr. Caldwell would look at the interrogation video of Anissa unless he was also called to evaluate her as well. I'm just kind of curious about all of this. Also, let me just say, hey, howdy, hey, I'm Kaylin. How you doing? Oh my goodness, Hold on a minute. I think I missed something. Oh my God. MK. Hold on. Let me scroll up right quick because I want to thank you. MK Lynn, thank you for gifting 5 memberships to the Ward Case Studies. If you are the recipient of one of these memberships, please thank our national treasure, friend of the channel, a scholar and a gentleman, MK. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think it's interesting that he interviewed the victim, but I'm curious. They all seem to want to interview. They all seem to be testifying for Anissa in this case, right? But they all are. They all look at Morgan too. I don't know, you guys. There's something about Anissa that just doesn't quite sit right with me. And I'm not saying that she's not mentally ill. I think I do agree that she's mentally ill. I just don't believe, I'm just not 100% convinced at this point, or convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, that her mental illness was such that she could not what's the word? Conduct her behavior, control her behavior, comport her behavior, whatever the word it is that they used. I don't think that she qualifies for a not guilty by reason of insanity defense. I just don't.
The first time. So those were the main documents I reviewed.
Okay, so after you'd reviewed all of those documents, met with Anissa, done the testing, did you reach some conclusions regarding her?
Yes, I did.
And did you put them into a report?
Yes, I did.
And is the report in front of you, Exhibit 8E?
Yes, it is.
Now, you've already told us you found her intelligence for a child of her age to be above average with the processing speed issue.
Yes, that's right.
And it sounds like her verbal skills were probably the greatest.
Yes, they were significantly above average.
And from her personality and diagnostic measures, what did you learn?
Well, first, they were very consistent across these measures. Some of the measures have scales built in to detect if the person is exaggerating symptoms or minimizing or just being inconsistent in their answers. There was no indication that she was being inconsistent or trying to manipulate the results. And in my interview with her, I also didn't detect any indications of that she was trying to sort of con me or sway the results.
Well, that's good. I mean, I do trust his assessment. What I worry about with Anissa is I still feel this way with respect to her. I haven't figured out, I don't know how I feel about Morgan yet. I'm going to wait until we cover her more in depth. But at this point, I still haven't heard anything that would compels me to believe that 7 years was enough. Was it even 7 years? Let me think. This happened in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 4 years. I'm sorry, 4 years. She was released after 4. Like, we're talking about the number 4. As in 4 times a year? That's the question that No Sweat Andy said or asked after it was the interviewer asked him that, said, hey, it's been, revealed that you visited Epstein 4 times a year. And he said, 4 times a year? Yeah, you did, bro. But that's how I feel like 4, like 4 years. How can that be enough time? I just don't think it is. I don't.
With the personality, the Achenbach measure, again, the thing that popped out was consistent with her clinical presentation, which is that she was depressed. She had some anxiety symptoms. She also tends to have a little bit of a trait that is similar to a psychotic propensity, but is not actually quite not quite a full-blown psychotic disorder or a schizophrenia kind of disorder. But some loosening of her rational thinking at times. And so depression, anxiety, and also with regard to her interpersonal functioning, her relationships, she's someone who tends to be very dependent, wants close relationships, and not someone who is particularly forceful or likely to likely to drive people off by her dominating personality or that type of thing.
Okay. After reviewing all of this information, did you find Anissa to have a diagnosable mental health disorder?
Yes, I did.
And what was that disorder?
There were two disorders. One was a delusional disorder. These were on the day of the incident. She suffered from a delusional disorder. And the second was a persistent depressive disorder, which is just a person has been depressed for an extended period of time. And those were the two key findings.
You also noted I believe you mentioned a trait.
That's correct.
It's called schizotypal, correct?
That's correct.
And that is something in the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistic Manual 5, that is considered part of the schizophrenia spectrum, correct?
It is, yes.
What is schizotypal?
Schizotypal, the key characteristic is the person has what's referred to as aberrant salient motivational processing. Now, all that means is that the thing that they pick out as the important thing that motivates their behavior is just very odd and sometimes sometimes can be bizarre. And so these are individuals who sometimes are, in adults, are sort of eccentric, have eccentric beliefs, believe in conspiracy theories or those kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily mean the person will develop delusional beliefs, but in a child and in an adult, it sort of predisposes the person to believe things that are delusional and to develop delusional disorders because they don't have the same capacity to analyze just the reality of certain situations, and they're likely to be motivated by something that other people would say, well, that's absurd, that makes no sense.
Okay. Now, what is the difference between, you mentioned a delusion, what's the difference between a delusion and you mentioned before, and the state has mentioned a number of times, say a belief in Santa Claus? Is there something different about those two things?
Yes, there's a couple of key features of a delusion that's different than religious beliefs, belief in Santa Claus, or anything else. A delusion includes that the person has a belief that they have a unique or special gift or special information that no one else has, and that gives them an insight into the delusional material that no one else has the ability to see. And so they believe often delusions involve a conspiracy or something like that. So if they talk to someone else about their delusional belief and the person says that's crazy, that makes no sense, the two possibilities for them, an average person would question the delusion. But again, that's normal salience processing, that's normal thinking. For a person with this characteristic and a person who's developed a delusion, their thinking is either the person who doesn't believe it is in on the conspiracy, they're part of the conspiracy, or else they just simply don't have this special gift to see the unique characteristics that they've been able to detect. And so that's one of the key differences in a delusion versus just an odd belief, or even not an odd belief, just a belief in something that you can't scientifically prove.
Did you reach an opinion after taking a look at the mental health disorders as to whether or not Anissa could appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions back in 2014?
Yes.
On May 31st?
Yes, I did.
And can you explain to me what that opinion is?
Well, it's two parts. First, I believe that her functioning on that day was that she believed in Slender Man. She believed that she and Morgan Geyser had a special understanding of that Slender Man was real, and no one else seemed to be able to have that insight. And a second component of delusional disorder is the person feels that they are compelled to act on the delusion. That's what makes it a disorder. If a person has a delusion and they just sit in their house and play video games or whatever and never act on it, then it's a delusion, but it's not a delusional disorder.
See, what I find very, very interesting, and I would just love to talk to these doctors about this. But let me, J. Rose, and welcome in, by the way, says, I feel the same way until we get to the following the law aspect. It feels like the delusional explanation of being afraid is untrue for Anissa. I feel a lack of general affect or care for it. That's where I'm stuck, right? That it's the part about being able to comport her behavior or change her behavior, knowing that it's wrong and but being unable, because everybody agrees that that she does know right from wrong. It's the part about the second prong, which is to comport her behavior to the conduct, to the law. That's the part I'm not sure she suffers from. And this is where I really would love to just sit down with these psychologists and ask them this question. How could she be afraid of something that she didn't yet know? So the idea is that she is afraid that if she doesn't go through with this, that her family and herself will be in danger of being harmed or killed. But Morgan didn't tell her about that quote unquote deal with Slender Man until after the attempted murder had occurred, after the stabbing. So how can you be in fear of something that you don't yet know? And then the other part of the question related to that is, when you listen to her interrogation and her explanation of what a proxy is, and that Morgan is the one who said, I figured out how we can become proxies. There's no discussion, at least that we've heard, right, between Morgan and Anissa about potential repercussions if they don't complete their what they have to do. Like if they were in a gang, it would be called putting in work, right? So if they don't finish putting in the work for Slender Man, they don't talk about what could happen. And how could they truly be in fear? This is the other thing. Whenever the subject of me not doing it, right? Like the girls said, I thought you were going to do it. No, you said you were going to do it. Both of the girls had that back and forth with each other. Okay. But the reason that they gave for not wanting to do it had nothing to do with actually being afraid. It was more, Anissa said she didn't want to do it because she didn't think that she was capable of it. She was too, and she used a phrase that Gypsy used on the stand when she testified. Frankly, I'm too squeamish. That's my Gypsy voice. Actually, I have a way better Gypsy voice, but I'll spare you. But that's what she said. And there's just some element of that just does not make sense. And Brandy, it's very, so Brandy says, so her belief is based, sorry about my creaky chair, I need some WD-40. So her belief is based on what Morgan told her. According to her, yes, and after the fact, except for, this is the part that doesn't make sense, okay? Why would Morgan suggest Payton? Payton had been for a very long time, until Anissa came into the picture in October of 2013, really Morgan's not just her best friend, but her only friend. So what motive would Morgan have for choosing Payton? The conflict in that dynamic that existed between the three girls was really between Payton and Anissa, not Morgan. I don't know. This is just, there's something about all of this with respect to Anissa that doesn't sit right with me. And I feel that 4 years is way too short of a time period. I think it's too short to do any of the things that need to be done, right? It's too short for the reform part, and it's too short for the punishment part. She should be punished. She knew what she did was wrong. That requires punishment. If you can accept what you did was wrong, right, then you should be punished for what you did. We teach our children that, right? But at the same time, because she had mental illness, you know, there's a level of reform that's required. And I'm concerned that those two criteria didn't get met, and it makes me worry about the future.
So people with delusional disorder have a compelling need to either save the world or save their family or something like that, and they can't let that go. And so there are two components to this. One is whether she fully appreciated the wrongfulness of her behavior. I think she understood that the behavior was going to be criminal, that they could be arrested. But believing that this was an evil force that no one else could understand except herself and Morgan Geyser placed on her a moral requirement to try to protect herself and her family from this horrible thing. And it was, in her mind, I think, that she was acting out of a sense of altruism, that she was saving someone in this very difficult moral choice. So in that regard, I don't think she fully had an appreciation of the wrongfulness, even though she understood the illegality of the behavior. I don't think she had a completely intact ability to understand the wrongfulness of the behavior. Secondly, if you don't fully understand, if you don't fully appreciate exactly what it is you do, you don't understand all the consequences and all of that, if you haven't got the ability to do that because of a mental disorder, then you don't have a full ability to conform to what the law requires. You're compelled to take an action that is illegal, but you don't have the full capacity to control your actions because you don't really understand the nature of what you're doing.
And are there any changes or additions you would make to that report today?
None that I can think of.
Okay. I'd move Exhibit AB into evidence.
Any objections?
No.
Received.
Dr. Caldwell, during the time that you were trying to reach a determination about the mental responsibility of Anissa Weier, did you take a look at the Creepypasta website?
Okay, so Brandy says, and shouldn't all these tests be done again to evaluate her current state of mind? So, yes, they should, and they were. We're going to get to that, but I wanted to move through the case chronologically. And so chronologically, we have to go through this trial. Then we have to go through the sentencing phase for Anissa before we can get to Morgan, right? Because Morgan has a sentencing phase. And then we have to get to Anissa's conditional release hearing. That's when we'll hear about her current evaluations. And J. Rose says, other experts are basing the reasoning on the same fear factor because that reason makes sense to them and covers their boute legally and professionally. See, I think that what's interesting about these two doctors is that they were appointed by the court themselves independently. It was an independent evaluation, separate from any evaluation that the evaluation by an expert that the state or the defense would bring in. And I do find that to be quite interesting. And I do find that there is obviously, I think that they are both highly educated. I think they've done the research. But I also think that I think Anissa's motive for doing what she did, I think she was far less motivated by fear. I think one of her motivations was to prove the skeptics wrong. I believe her when she said that. But I also think the other part of it was, I think that Anissa wanted to become a creepypasta story herself.
Yes, I did.
And what did you find?
It was remarkable. It was very convincing. There were medical records, or at least what were purported to be medical records of psychiatrists interviewing patients who had had contact with Slender Man. There were police reports documenting contacts with Slender Man or investigations. There was a series of memos that seemed to be from the Secret Service or some national, possibly a division of the FBI, talking about investigating Slender Man and having a project where they were investigating these things. There was a videotape of an older woman, probably in her late 60s or early 70s, giving her last will and testament and asking that her children used her finances to investigate Slender Man and to prove the reality, because she had had several encounters with Slender Man. So there were a number of part of the entire story, I guess, at the time was to try to create a sense that this was real, which made it frankly, more creepy, and to try to kind of get under people's skin by presenting what appeared to be a lot of factual basis for it, the kinds of documents and information that frankly would be relied on among medical professionals or police or lots of other professionals in coming to certain conclusions.
So Chicken Shite says, isn't this the guy from the facility? Yes. Dr. Caldwell and Dr. Van Rybroek are both from the facility. Yes.
So it was very remarkable how it had been put together.
Okay. And within the Creepypasta website, there were numerous references to Slender Man, correct?
Yes, there were.
As well as Jeff the Killer.
Yes.
Slender Man was portrayed as an individual who stalked, stole, and strangled children, correct?
That's correct, yes. Over many years. And he also had the ability to teleport instantaneously, and in some references had the ability to control people's minds from a distance and that type of thing. So you would never be able to see him or actually capture him. He would just teleport out. And he apparently had the ability to teleport his proxies, or the people that were under his control. He could also teleport them to different locations as well.
So the wiki itself told people that Slender Man killed, correct?
Oh yes, that was the key feature, that he would kill children, capture and kill children.
And the Jeff the Killer that I mentioned before, you heard about him from Anissa, correct?
Yes, I think I ran across it on the wiki. I can't remember whether I heard it from her first or on the wiki site.
Okay. And that was an individual actually named Jeff Woods, correct?
That's correct.
And when you met with Anissa in July of 2014, did she still believe Jeff Woods existed?
Yes, she did.
And did she still have some nuggets of the belief in Creepypasta and the Slender Man myth?
Yes, I'd say she was a bit mixed. She still believed in parts of it. For example, Jeff the Killer, the story is that this was an individual who killed his family and set fire to the house and disfigured himself, and that he was now being held in a psychiatric facility in northern Wisconsin.
Okay, it's taken me a minute, but I've been trying to figure out how to talk about what I feel is coming, what I personally think Anissa is up to. You know who she reminds me of? She reminds me of that teenager in Florida, Rod Farrell, who had the quote unquote vampire cult, and they him along with 3 other teenagers, 2 girls and another teenage boy, murdered one of the teenage girls' parents. She's the one that opened the door, all of those things. And he went to great lengths during the pre-trial and even during his trial to come across as scary, as the boogeyman, as, you know, all of those things. I feel like that's and that's the vibe I get from Anissa, that she wants this, or at the time wanted this infamy. Maybe she has regrets now, but she wanted it at the time.
But that he also was essentially a proxy for Slender Man. This gets into, it's a good illustration of kind of the irrational component of this, because Slender Man could tell, if it was consistent, Slender Man could just simply teleport him out of the hospital, but that didn't seem to be happening. Jeffrey Woods was one of the proxies for Slender Man, or in some way associated with this, and was dedicated to killing children also.
And you have evaluated or met with Anissa at least since to see how she's doing, correct?
That's correct.
And when was the last time you met with her?
The last time I believe was about a month ago.
And where did you meet with her?
In the detention center, Washington County.
Same place you met with her back in 2014?
Right, for all of the interviews, yes.
And did you still see some kernels of the delusion?
Yes. She partially, I should say. She still believes that Jeff the Killer is a real person and is being held in a facility in northern Wisconsin. Doesn't believe he has any special powers, and she didn't when I met with her back in July of 2014, but still believed the rest of the story. She had some sort of mixed feelings about Slender Man and was thinking that he may be more just an evil force in the world, something more akin to the way some people think of the devil, but someone who may be or may not be out there influencing people to do bad things and just an evil force.
And was that consistent with the schizotypal that you had previously diagnosed her?
Yes, very much so. This kind of characteristic often is more bizarre during the teenage years, where the person's reasoning is not as mature, and then often matures into more of what might be a fairly conventional spirituality or religious belief that the devil has an influence over our lives, and that if we can stay on the right path, that we can resist the influence of evil and the devil and that kind of thing. So it can develop. In my interview with her just this last month, it was clear that it was starting to develop into a more of a conventional kind of, maybe somewhat eccentric, but more of a conventional spirituality.
And you are aware that Anissa, for the time that she has been at West Bend, has been, at least for part of the time, meeting with a counselor.
Yes, she has.
She's not on medication, though, correct?
Not that I know of, no.
The opinions that you came to and the conclusions you came to and the diagnoses that you came to within your report, do you hold those to, are they the same conclusions you would have today?
Oh, yes, yes.
And do you hold those beliefs to a reasonable degree of certainty in psychology?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, before his cross, Chicken Shite says, we have a huge music festival on the shore every summer called Wake the Giant. LOL. Haven't woken him up yet with the music. Try again this year. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are familiar with the movie The Curse of La Llorona. Okay, so like that is like a real urban legend, I suppose. But it's, like for me, Mexican folklore. But basically, it's about a woman who discovered her husband was cheating on her, and she drowned her children in a fit of rage. And now she wanders the earth crying, right? But really, the whole purpose of La Llorona is to she comes and gets kids when they don't be bad, or when they're bad. Okay, so that's what they that's the legend or whatever. That's you don't want you want me to call you La Llorona? You're being bad. You know what I mean? So I understand how I understand the purpose of legend of stuff like that, like to control you, like when you're a kid, if you don't be good, La Llorona will get you, or El Cucuy will get you, or, you know what I mean? Like I get those, but this Slender Man thing, like, I don't know. When I looked up Slender Man the other day and Jeff the Killer, there's arguments and articles on the, posts on the web about could Jeff the Killer take Slender Man and why they're enemies. So I'm confused when how they became, first he worked for him or under him or whatever, and now all of a sudden they're enemies. I mean, I didn't click on any of it because I was doing the trial, but I just, there's something about Anissa, like I said, she reminds me of Rod Farrell. Look him up, from Florida. Yeah. Let's keep going.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge.
Before we start there, hold on a second, Mr. Prosecutor Man. I need to address the camera operator once again. The judge asked for cross-examination, not giving us the Blair Witch vibe, okay, with the dadgum camera. There is a way to slowly pan. Sheesh.
I think this might be a good time for the jury to stand and stretch.
Yeah, while the prosecution gets it together. Come on, gal. I don't see any regrets on her at all. Do you guys? Like, she is just as cold
And Your Honor, prior to additional testimony, did
No, we're not on the record right now.
and flat
stretching?
as she
We'll let
was
everybody stretch and then we'll take it.
on May 31st of 2014. Yes, chicken shite. I can't highlight that because but yeah, all of them. If she even had any to begin with. I don't know. Let me skip forward.
Please be seated.
Yeah, are we going to be?
And then, Attorney McMahon, you had a comment to make?
I apologize, Your Honor. I was not sure if I had moved Exhibit AB.
You had, and I received it. Very good. Thank you. Then we should be everyone set in the degree. All right, very good. Then I think we can proceed. Attorney Osborne.
Thank you, Judge.
Is your microphone on?
It is not, Judge. Thank you so much.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, hold on a sec. Let me pause this real quick. Are you going to be asking a question in my lifetime, counselor? Violet says she looks like she's bothered to be there. Yes, she looks like a typical 15-year-old in school. Like, how much longer is this class? I'm ready to dip. You know what I mean? That's what I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
I just want to start with a couple of preliminary questions so I make sure I understand the report. You testified today that you met with Anissa 4 times?
I believe altogether 4 times, including this one just last month.
Okay. But if I'm reading your report correctly, it says personal interviews with Anissa and psychological testing on July 9th and 14th, lasting 5.5 hours. And I'll be the first to admit that I've missed things before, but is there another indication there, the things that you did that indicates there were, I guess at this time, even 1 or 2 other interviews, or did they both come after this report?
They both came after the report.
And you didn't file a supplemental report, so is it fair to say that nothing of significance came out of that, both in terms of changing your opinion or anything that you felt needed to be reported?
That's right. I met with her once in November of 2015, I believe it was, around competency, I believe it was. And then this last one just to catch up on how she'd been doing more recently. So there was nothing of significance.
And this is not a big deal, but I just want to make sure I understand. When you say lasting 5.5 hours, is that the 2 interviews together lasted 5.5 hours, or each one lasted 5.5 hours?
The total was 5.5 hours.
Thank you. Now, and I know Ms. McMahon already went through this, but you are hired by the defense in this case, correct?
That's correct.
And on 3 occasions, you've rendered opinions about this case. And
hold on. I needed to correct myself. Dr. Caldwell was brought in by the defense, but Dr. Van Rogue was not. I have to figure out how to say his name because clearly that ain't it.
for want of a better way of saying it, on each of the 3 occasions, you rendered an opinion that was what the defense was hoping you would render, correct?
That would be favorable to the defense. That's right.
Now, Doctor,
I'm less compelled at this point, having that information that I guess I missed.
Now, I guess I want to just make sure I understand something. You talked about delusions, and then you talked about other things that someone might believe, like Santa Claus, and how they're different, correct?
That's right. That's right.
It's fair to say, I think, isn't it, that sometimes kids, because of their imagination, see things that aren't there? They're afraid of the boogeyman, or...
Sure. Ghosts in the closet, things like that, sure.
And then...
Okay, I don't really appreciate that because I am an adult and I know that the El Kukui will come and get you if you are bad.
As you mentioned that, Anissa's father talked about an incident when she was 10 where she thought she saw eyes in her closet. Now, that was never repeated, never brought up to you, so I'm assuming that would just be, you would consider that more of just childish imagination, correct?
Yeah, probably. I haven't talked about that. I haven't heard about that particular item, but that sounds like just childhood imagination.
So not everything a child believes rises to the level of a delusion, correct?
That's correct.
And is it a delusion? You said that when you most recently met with Anissa, she still believes that Jeff the killer exists, but that her belief is now morphed to and I don't want to use the word ordinary, but I'm going to use it. He's just an ordinary killer who's now in an insane asylum. He's not some supernatural being. That's, if I understood you correctly.
That's correct, yes.
And is that a delusion if everything she's reviewed, you talked about going on the creepypasta website, how they have fake police reports, they have fake newspaper articles, they have fake pictures. Is it a delusion if you've seen all that, and that's all you've seen, that you think that it's real?
Not by itself, no. That's not enough to be a delusion or delusional disorder.
So it is possible to believe in something that's not real and still not have it be a delusion, correct?
Correct.
Ooh, that's a really good point, because she was dubious that Jeff the killer was real, right? And what did she do? She went on the internet to vet the veracity of this story, which means that she had doubts. I'm very curious about this. Was it actually a delusion? Or was it more that she, after attempting to vet, and and he's not wrong. I mean, there is stuff out there that, purports. And if you are, adults get duped on the internet all the time and thinking things, information is real when it's not actually real. So is it a delusion, or was she duped?
And when we get to the next level, now we accept that, for the sake of argument, that Anissa has a delusion. That doesn't make her have to kill somebody, does it?
The delusion by itself doesn't, once it becomes a delusional disorder, then again, as I mentioned, there's a compulsive quality to it, and that manifests in different ways with different disorders.
In this case, you found the compulsive element of it to be, as you put in the conclusion to your Exhibit AB report, you found the compulsive element to be Anissa developed a delusional belief that Slender Man posed a threat to the life and safety of children and their parents in general, and to herself and those she loved specifically, correct?
That's correct.
That's the compulsion you're talking about.
Well, it goes a little beyond that, in that because she and Morgan were the only people that had this insight, it was incumbent upon them to act to defend the safety of their families from this evil force. So it's the combination of the belief, but also it includes the sense that you are the only person who can do anything about this.
Now, maybe I'm reading your report wrong, and you can tell me if I am. You concluded first that although Anissa's ability to appreciate the wrongfulness of the alleged acts was substantially impaired, she continued to remain a minimal capacity to appreciate that the alleged acts were illegal, correct?
Correct.
And then you went on to say that she lacks substantial capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of law, and that's because of the compulsion that we were just talking about.
The compulsion and the delusional disorder, yes.
Let me put it in a way that seems to me to be correct, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. What you're saying is she understood that killing Payton would be wrong and illegal, but she felt she had to do it because of the delusion and the compulsion.
She understood it was illegal. What I'm saying is that her ability to understand the wrongfulness was compromised by the delusional disorder. In other words, obviously, if you know something is illegal, there are certain circumstances where you may feel like you have no choice but to take the step in spite, because there's a moral requirement for you to act in the way you understand the world to be at that moment, and that was the compromise.
What you said in the last paragraph of your discussion was Anissa's delusional disorder caused her to believe that engaging in the alleged act was the only way to protect her family and her life, correct?
Correct.
Now, you've concluded that Anissa and Morgan had a relationship that caused Anissa to have a shared delusion, correct?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Sure. You concluded that Anissa has a shared delusion that basically comes from Morgan.
Right, that they developed a shared delusional disorder. That's
and I conclude from that, and you can tell me if I'm misunderstanding it from I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but from my research, I conclude from what you said that you would believe that Morgan is the dominant in the shared delusion and Anissa is the submissive.
Well, it's partially true. Typically, we talk about a primary, the person who has the schizophrenia, and a secondary. They may not have a dominant and a submissive relationship, but they're, the dominant the primary person typically has a long-standing or a more severe psychiatric disorder, and the secondary adopts the delusional disorder, delusional beliefs out of an intense relationship with the primary. It may not be a dominant situation.
All right. let's look at, I'll use the correct words, or the words at least that you're using. You would conclude that Anissa was the secondary.
That's correct.
You've clearly done some research into shared delusion disorders, correct?
Some, yes.
They're rare, is that true?
They are rare, that's correct.
And in fact, if we look even deeper, this particular shared delusional disorder relationship is very rare, correct? And let me be more specific before you even answer the question. I'll come back to the question. The normal shared delusional disorder participants are usually in their 40s or older, correct?
It tends to be more common in adults, yes.
In most situations, there's a familial relationship, correct?
Probably the most, yes.
Are you familiar with an article entitled "The Nosological Significance of Folie à Deux, a Review of the Literature," published in the Annals of General Psychiatry?
No, I actually can't remember if I reviewed it or not.
Doctor, I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 6. Just take a moment to look at that. Once you're prepared, that you reviewed it enough, let me know.
Okay.
And does that appear to be a scholarly treatise reviewing the literature on shared delusional disorder?
Without reading it in detail, yes, it does.
In fact, and so that we're all clear, though I think it came up yesterday, folie à deux is a French phrase for shared delusional disorder. I think literally means madness of two, is that correct?
Yes, it dates to the 1800s, but yes, it's a French term for the same disorder.
And I'm just trying to get to like what I was saying, which is that it seems that this would be an unusual thing to be a shared delusion. It indicates on page 3, they looked at two groups that were analyzed between 1942 and 93, correct? And then from 93 to 2005.
Yes, that's correct.
The mean age of the primary in the first group was 48, and the second group was 52. Secondary in the first group was 42.9, and the second group was 45.9. So it is generally, at least, older people that are involved in this. Is that a fair statement based on that?
Generally fair, although in both of those, the youngest was, in one case, 9 years old, and in the other case, 10 years old.
And I respect that, and I was going to get to that. It's not impossible, I'm not saying that, but it is unusual for two people of this age to have a shared delusion disorder, correct?
It's an unusual disorder to begin with, but this age is also unusual.
And if we look on page 4, we see that in terms of relationships, in the earlier study, 9.9% were friends, and only 2.4% in the second study were friends. So it's also unusual that they're not family members, correct?
Yes, in this study, yes.
And then if we look at the length of association, we find that on page bottom of page 4, the duration of the association generally was 47 months in the first period and 32 in the second one. So I mean, second group of people being analyzed, correct?
That's correct, and not surprising.
And in this case, the information is that Morgan and Anissa met in October of 2013, and by December or January of the next year, that's 2 or 3 months, they're already planning this event. That is an unusually short period of time for this shared delusion to develop, isn't it?
It would be compared to the results in this review.
And in fact, the indication is that they were spending, this comes from your report, 40 to 80 minutes a day together.
All right, before he answers that, I just want to acknowledge, yes, chicken shite, that does seem like probably how that occurred, because the term hysteria, well, histo, that's a reference to the uterus, right? So there we go.
Sounds about right, yes.
Now, that seems to be an awful short period of time for that delusion to, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's an awful short period of time for that to be together, for that delusion to transfer from one to the other. I mean, we're not just talking 2 to 3 months, we're talking roughly an hour a day during those 2 to 3 months of combined time.
Yeah, I don't know that that was the total sum of their time together, that was the time they rode the bus together.
Okay.
But yes, it is a short time.
And in terms of, and I think you hit upon this, in terms of it used to be that psychologists and psychiatrists believed that the best treatment for this was simply separation, correct?
Going back many years, yes, that was the thinking.
Now,
Hold on. I want to correct myself. It's hyster is the medical prefix. So there you have it. It's been a minute since I've been in coding class. So here we go.
more recent studies show that separation alone is frequently not enough to get over the problem.
That's correct.
That it requires either psychological treatment or medication or both to actually overcome the shared delusion. Is that a fair statement?
Well, for the secondary to not be delusional.
Correct.
Yes.
And certainly, and I know you talked about what Anissa told you, but certainly it would be unusual for the delusion to go away in a matter of hours, wouldn't it?
No, actually, this is one of the common characteristics, at least of what we see is there are certain types of shared delusional disorders. Some of them remain even after people are separated and they are fixed. But there's a category that is very common for the secondary person to drop the delusional beliefs almost immediately after they're separated from the person. This is why, for a period of time, psychiatrists believe that all you need to do is separate them and the secondary would clear right away, because they had seen that in many cases.
And I think we've touched upon this, even if they have a shared delusional disorder, or even if Anissa has one, does that always result in an opinion that if the person does something wrong, they wouldn't be responsible for it?
No, not at all.
No. But in this case, you believe it to be true, but it isn't always the case.
It isn't always the case, that's correct.
Also, and this is something for me to ask Dr. B, just while we're waiting for them to get their question together. But you know what I'm curious about is I haven't heard any testimony about potential personality disorders, and I wonder if that is because of her age.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Redirect.
Thank you. Dr. Caldwell, the article that you were just discussing with Mr. Osborne, it has some conclusions, correct?
Yes, it does.
And
Boss lady, wow, babe. You know what I think? This is just my opinion. I think that just due to biology, right, of an adolescent, with the influx of hormones, their brains are developing still, just everything biological, right? I think that it must be, as a psychiatrist or a psychologist, incredibly difficult to diagnose them, which is why I am very concerned about this situation of 4 years, right? Because if Anissa is 15, right, in 2017 when this took place, almost 16, I think she is, right? Or maybe just turned 16. Regardless, would only be 19 or 20 when she was released. And I don't know. It just seems too soon. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that, boss lady. I can't imagine how frustrating and upsetting it would be to see an issue in your child and work to try to get the issue, to figure out what the issue is, and then from there handle and treat the issue. And and be told that it's not you, or it's not them, it's you. That would be, I can't even imagine. I'm so sorry you went through that.
The conclusions indicated what?
Well, I could just read the brief conclusion in the abstract. It says, folie à deux, this disorder, can occur in many situations outside the confines of the current classification system and is not as rare as believed and should alert the clinician to unrecognized psychiatric problems in the secondary. So the conclusion is simply that there's more variation than it may be that this disorder has been missed fairly often. And I think that may, in my 40 years of clinical experience, I guess I've thought back on several cases that I've worked with where the primary came in with a delusional disorder and had a close relationship with someone. We never brought that person in to assess whether they were a secondary, whether that was a shared delusion. And right now in the field, there's a suspicion that a lot of those people who are living in close proximity or have intense relationships may have a shared delusional disorder as well. So it could be more common than we think.
Okay. And you have worked with a lot of children over the years, correct?
Yes, I have.
You still work with children.
Yes, I do.
And many of the children that you work with are at Mendota Mental Health, correct?
That's correct.
And so I think it would be fair of me to assume that many of them have diagnoses, correct?
Yes, virtually all do, yes.
Would you consider all of them not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect?
No, the overwhelming majority don't meet that criteria.
And if you had felt Anissa didn't meet that criterion, we probably wouldn't have you here today, correct?
That's correct. I would have probably made a phone call, and then I'd be back at work today.
Okay. Dr. Caldwell, you, in your course of work at Mendota, have also supervised persons who were considered NGI, correct?
Yes, I have.
And have you made, in what capacity?
My first position at Mendota more than 20 years ago was as the staff psychologist on the admission unit for people who had acute mental health problems. So they were civilly committed from the community for being mentally ill and dangerous. And over about a year that I was there, we had about 400 admissions. So I evaluated 400 people in that capacity. And then I ran the unit for the 14 people who were the most aggressive and difficult to manage criminally insane patients in the state. And I did that for 2 years. And of course, there were a lot of individuals who had a variety of diagnoses in that capacity.
And in that capacity, did you have to do evaluations about whether that person was safe to leave your unit?
Objection, Your Honor. The state asked no questions on cross-examination about the doctor's background or prior work or anything else. This is clearly beyond the scope of cross-examination.
The state implied that the doctor only testifies for individuals who pay him.
I'll overrule the objection. I'm satisfied that it's appropriate to redirect in this type of case.
That's fine, but I object to that last way of putting my questions, because I don't think I said that in the least, Your Honor.
Well, we'll note that in the record. Thank you.
Dr. Caldwell, you've testified about whether people need to leave the facility, correct?
That's correct.
And as someone who was working in the facility, it was your job to evaluate to make sure people were safe
Yes, that's correct.
or dangerous and needed to remain.
Yes, it's a fundamental part of that kind of a setting.
Okay. And when you mentioned civil commitment at the intake unit, that would be under the statute chapter 51, not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect evaluation, correct?
Correct. That's the mental health code, which has nothing to do with criminal behavior or police or the courts or those kinds of things.
No, chicken
And
shite. Hold on a
You
sec.
have at times supported person.
I'm going to do the closing arguments tomorrow along with what happened with the jury, because there's something that did happen with the jury before they gave their verdict. And then we'll get their verdict tomorrow. And then the next day, tomorrow's Wednesday, Thursday, we'll do her sentencing.
Persons not being found not guilty of mental disease or defect, correct?
Very often, yes.
And that was when you were evaluating them when you were at Mendota or privately?
Both. I've had times both in my private practice and at Mendota where my opinion was that they were criminally responsible for their actions.
And your report, while it takes into account Anissa's age at the time, in 2014, your conclusion isn't that she was a child, so she's not responsible, is it?
No. It is, her immaturity played a role in the development of her delusional disorder, but the issue is that she had the delusional disorder, and that impaired her ability to appreciate wrongfulness, as I've described, and ability to control her actions.
And if I understand it correctly, a delusional disorder is different than simply a delusion, correct?
Yes, I would say so, yes.
So a person with a delusional disorder has a delusion, but a person with a delusion might not have a disorder.
That's correct. For it to be a disorder, the person has to do things that are maladaptive, that cause some problem in their social world or some kind of serious problem.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Further cross-examination.
Okay, I have a question. So currently where she's housed in this time frame in 2017, right? Certainly she would be around other inmates.
No further questions.
All right, very good.
Hold
That
on.
concludes then Dr. Caldwell's testimony. Is he under subpoena?
Yes, sir.
May he be released?
Yes, sir.
Any objections?
No.
All right, you're released, doctor. Thank you for being here.
That is not necessary. Based upon the evidence, Judge, that was presented over the past 4 days, no reasonable jury could decide that we have not shown by a reasonable certainty based upon the greater weight of the credible evidence that Anissa did not suffer from a mental disease or disorder. When we presented evidence from 3 well-respected psychologists.
Hold on
in the
a
field of
second. I think I
child
missed
psychology.
something. Hold on.
They
Weier have further witnesses or evidence to call or to place in evidence?
We would rest, Your Honor.
Okay, then Ms. Weier rests. Then the burden moves to the state. Does the state have any evidence or witnesses to present?
No, Your Honor, the state does not.
Okay, then the state rests. That would conclude the testimonial and the evidentiary part of the hearing. We've discussed off the record scheduling of the case decided to have the arguments and instructions tomorrow morning beginning at 8:30 to give you the full day, the jury the full day to process the case and deliberate. As part of that, keep in mind that there's 16 of you, and that it'll be a jury of 12. There'll be a selection process of picking the alternates after the conclusion of the arguments. With that, then we'll release the jury at this time. Very good. Please be seated. I wanted to discuss the issue of the alternates for a moment, but are there any other issues the court should address before moving into that?
Yes, Judge. On Anissa's behalf, I'm going to make a motion for a directed verdict, and that's based upon what the evidence has shown through the presentation of the.
Okay, so that's the part I wanted to hear. So it's interesting in a situation like this, they do make a motion for a directed verdict. And that is where they're asking the judge to make the verdict, to make it the directed verdict. They don't need the jury, basically, is what that is. So I just thought that was interesting, and the judge is not going to grant that. It's going to go to the jury because we all know how this ends. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go for today. I will be back tonight because Donna Adelson. Oh, before you go, I want to show you guys something just really quick. Okay, but while I can talk, while I do that, I will be back tonight because Donna Adelson has a hearing, another pretrial hearing, and this is the thumbnail. I've got Donna Adelson all the way looking like the Godfather. I'm quite proud of this thumbnail. So be looking out for that. I'm going to, I need to see the hearing first in order for me to know how to schedule it, because I want to make sure that I don't go over Allie and Melissa, who have a live scheduled today for 7 p.m. Central, 8 Eastern time. They're going over more of Casey Anthony. So I want to make sure that I give the ladies plenty of time to do that. Here is Melissa Jade's channel. Hold on, I spelled her name wrong. Sorry, Melissa, don't be mad. Here is her channel link so that you can go over there and set your notification. Here is Allie's channel link, just so you can subscribe and set your notifications to all so that you get when Allie comes live. And I think that's all I have for you guys today. I thank you all for being here very, very much. If you haven't done so, would you please do your girl a favor and give me whatever you think I deserve? Thumbs up, thumbs down. I trust that you will judge me fairly and accurately. And with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I will see you all tonight. Bye.
Cause it's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got shit to do. Well, fuck you.
No malicious intent or effort was towards it.
No malicious.
Finish her!
Minutes later.
We all do a little mad sometimes.
Oh.